Good evening, everyone. I will now convene the Burnsville City Council work session, and we will move directly to the items on our agenda. And the first item on the agenda is a sketch plan review for Northland Real Estate Group, 15309 Maple Island Road, and this is regarding private utility, the park trails update. Ms. Garros?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. The application before you is actually a continued discussion from your July 10th work session meeting. The applicant is Northland Real Estate Group, and we do have representatives here, Brian Farrell from Northland Real Estate, and then also Darren Lazen from Landform. And council should have received a letter today from Landform, just kind of discussing the project and a little bit where they would like to go.
And Ms. Garros, I just want everyone to also know that present in this discussion, our other staff members is Mr. Ryan Peterson, our Public Works Director, and Mr. Garrett Beck, our Parks and Recreation and Facilities Director. So, because all of this has everything to do with Public Works as well as the park. And so, thank you, gentlemen, for being present.
This is a follow-up discussion, and the council at the last meeting asked us to look into several items. The applicant did provide the escrow to pay for staff time, including the city attorney's time, to research the background about how the parcels were acquired, the lock-on grants, and then also to look at, from a staff standpoint, answer questions related to, are there other city parks that have private utilities and private trail connections, and then what would be the cost, possible cost implications of a project. The subject site is located at the Grace United Methodist Church property, and the applicant is looking at possibly dividing the church property into two different lots. And the site plan that council has looked at in the past is the same that is shown on the right-hand part of the screen. That would be a 100-unit active senior living type of facility. And then there is also a discussion, and part of their application included the potential to provide some trail connections and additional trails within Crystal Lake West Park. The majority of the research that staff has conducted really relates to the park itself, and the majority of this discussion this evening and presentation will be related to that. In terms of, there are really two primary questions that staff believes that we need direction on for the applicant. One would be the land use change. Specifically, if we go from a residential, low-density residential land use to mixed use, which is a commercial type use, there does need to be a supermajority vote from the council to support that. So 4 out of 5 council members. So that would be one of the major items. And then the next one would be based on what you hear tonight and the discussions here tonight, if the council sees that there should be direction given to proceed with looking into the parks issue with the Department of Natural Resources. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Garrett. Mr. Beck.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Staff spent time looking into the background of lock-on. The property that we call Crystal Lake West Park was acquired as part of a 1981 federal grant with the Land and Water Conservation, and that's where lock-on is, which we'll refer to for the rest of the presentation, is where that's from. The planned use of that property at the time and what was included in the development process was it was going to be a natural park with passive activities that took place, and that did include the off-street paved trail that currently runs along the lake shore today. As a result of as a result of how this land was acquired, if there were to be modifications going forward to that property, it would require a review and approval by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. So the group that oversaw lock-on at the time no longer exists, and the Minnesota DNR has taken over that. So at this point.
All right.
Yeah.
One of the key factors of this is right now there is no sanitary sewer pipe in the road. It's you can see up in Crystal Lake Road on the north side there exists pipes that are available for that, but it's going to take like remote access to do so. So don't take anything on the screen there as like a final design. It's purely options that would be something that would be available for discussion. So what we did is we kind of we looked through 3 options. Option A would be the most direct route, but when you talk lock-on, it's protecting the natural resources. The primary natural resources in the park are the 100-year-old oak trees, and so option A goes right through the center of where the primary natural resources are located. And that would require a directional drilling where they're not open cutting it, so they can just drill it right underneath the ground. And they could likely start up at the back of the church and come out somewhere near the parking lot of the boat ramp right now. So that would be considered option A. Option B would be, all right, you're allowed to go in the park, but you're going to have to go in a route that isn't affecting the natural resources so much. So the option B, especially on the north side there, really goes into an area that was likely a field at some point. So the trees there are not of nearly the same caliber, and also when we put it back together, you can just put the ground back. You don't have to worry about you're tearing out 100-year-old oak trees. And then option C would be another option where they would just stay in the right of way and have a normal sanitary sewer pipe like you would see anywhere else. The road, as we know, was rebuilt just a couple of years ago, so it's likely feasible they could stay within the boulevard area and not have to dig the whole road up. It's still the longest route. In terms of risk, option A is probably the most risky option. If you remember on the Excel Energy when they tried to go under Black Dog Lake. That was that drilling thing that they struggled with so often.
Yeah.
So although it may be the cheapest because it's the shortest, it may not be. It could end up being the most expensive and the biggest chance of upsetting the apple cart in regards to natural resources. For trails, as the map pointed out, there is a trail that goes along the lake now on the east side and south side. One benefit to the park that we observe would be is if we were able to go around the exterior in the yellow area there, and then either in the blue or red, and then down and then hooked up, we would have a plowable trail at that point. Right now, we do get requests to have that trail plowed that's existing, but
You and I had lots of emails this last winter about that one.
we most certainly did. This would be in a more, the grades wouldn't be so extreme, and we would be able to use a pickup truck if we were able to do that. If we built, or if they built the trail at the same exact time that they built the pipe. So if they were to hook on at the boat launch and followed the yellow up on the north and then built a trail over the sewer pipe, so therefore it'd be much more easy for them to gain access to there if it ever needed maintenance. And then hooked in down at the way on the south end there is where the trail comes out. So those are basically the 3 options that we've come up with. I guess that's enough on that slide.
Okay.
Staff's opinion is because of the potential to affect the natural resources, we are not in favor of option A. There's a lot of risk, and the pipe may last forever, or it may fall apart at some point, even if they are successful in constructing it the first time and have to cut their way in and dig it out. So we're not in favor of option A. Option B is most certainly a feasible option. It seemed to meet the intent of the grant. We would recommend that they construct the trail so they could retain access to the sewer pipe along with providing a benefit to the park and the users if you were to do option B. And then option C would be more right on the right-of-way line. So therefore, they're not really affecting the park, so to ask them to go ahead and construct a trail at the same time doesn't seem like it would have as much merit to it. So once again, those are not final designs. Those are just simply options that are out there that we are looking for input on. The main thing is could you vote for a project that the sewer line goes to the park? And if it's yes, although staff is recommending option A, would you allow that, or option B? That's mainly the thing what we're looking for from Public Works and Parks Planning.
I'll go with Councilmember Keeley, and I'll go with Councilmember Schultz, and then Councilmember Keeley, and then I'll go over to the next side. Councilmember Schultz.
What is the developer, like, if we were looking at option B and option C, what's the preference of the developer?
I can't answer that question. I don't know.
We don't know that yet.
No.
And then give us your name and address for the record, please.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Darren Lazan. I'm with Landform Professional Services, and I represent Northland Real Estate, the applicant on the item before you tonight. Jumping into this issue alone without backing up with a little bit of background, I'll do my best to answer that one. You know, we asked and funded the research done to find out if we could cross in the park, and that was done and completed, and I believe the answer is yes. We certainly are interested in continuing our efforts with staff to find an alignment that makes sense. I guess we'd ask tonight that the option A not be closed, but that we continue the discussion. And if you could go back one page to the map of the three alignments on there. Our concern and again, your staff has very excellently pointed out that these are schematic designs and not final designs and so forth. But just so you understand from 30,000 feet, option A is a gravity line, the shortest distance, directional board, so we would make it through 3/4 or more of that run without coming daylighting and then going back underground again. So the disturbance, we believe, can be minimized. It would likely be a welded HDPE service pipe, so it's a very high strength, high longevity solution. It's very commonly used and has a very low risk of any future problems. As you go to B or C, both require we come down the hill on the backside. We have a lift station, private lift station, I guess, in both, and we do a pressure line all the way around the perimeter to make that connection. There really is very little, if any, difference between B and C. Both, I am very concerned that would challenge the feasibility of this project. By the time we put a lift station and a pressure line and run all the way around the park, that's a tremendous undertaking. So I really believe that it's an exercise in assessing that risk that staff has raised with that directional bore and working forward on either A or an alignment of A that is workable. Because, as I said, if my choices are B and you build a $100,000 trail, or C, add $5,000 more pipe, I'll take C. I mean, there's really no reason to go with B. We still have to go to the bottom of the hill and then trench all the way over the top of the hill and back down again, and that's going to have all the costs associated with it. So I'm concerned about being locked into B or C as we leave here today, because the feasibility is really at risk if we close the door to A. So again, our request is that we not potentially pick a course in B or C, but let us continue to work with staff on addressing their concerns.
Okay.
So to
Councilmember
clarify,
Schultz?
the options then we really should be looking at or discussing would be A and C. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Councilmember Keeley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Noted in our background, there are a lot of private utilities installed in public parks. Ryan, can you elaborate a little bit more on what types of utilities, what types of parks they're located in? Are there any around Crystal Lake? I know there's shoreland residences, which I used to be one of them, that's very close to the water. And so there's utilities running into all those homes all the way around the lake. Can you elaborate on a little bit of the broader parks utilities that exist today and how this may or may not differ from that? And that is option A, of course.
We are blessed with lots of utility easements that carry transmission lines of gas and electric. So that's the primary private utilities that are in our parks this time. We do have the one Allen Magnet House for the arts. So whether
That was
that's
back in the 70s.
right, so that'd be a similar thing where it's a service line going through there. But you could argue that that's not necessarily private. But most of the utilities in the parks are transmission lines for easement holders that were there before the park district. Or I guess we don't have the park district, but our system of parks.
So we have a lot of examples of utilities going through parkland.
Oh, yeah, I mean, think of
But
the
not-
Private
Tennessee,
or public,
think of the
doesn't
Tennessee
matter.
Park.
It's still a
We just-
utility through parkland, right?
This past year, we allowed Excel to put the 16-inch high-pressure gas right down through Tennessee Park. So
Yeah.
Right.
we certainly have done it. There
it-
weren't quite the same natural resources
Sure.
where they went in this particular.
One of my early thoughts was the concern of disturbance, and that's been addressed by underground boring, where you're only going to pop up once. And so most people would never know that there was ever anything put underground there. It's minimal to almost negligible impact to the natural environment. The biggest question I think we all had is you pointed out, was is it even legally feasible for us to allow this? And that question has been addressed, and I'd like to defer to our city attorney just to affirm what's in our background, that this is something pending approval of the DNR that we can authorize.
Just that, we've concluded that as Lock-On funded, if DNR approves it as a non-conversion, their handbook and their past practices have been to allow easements under certain conditions that do not constitute a conversion or a violation of the Lock-On grant funding. So the short answer is yes.
Okay,
And
thank
the
you.
other thing is that we haven't gotten that ruling from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources.
That is correct, and as indicated by staff and others, the more invasive, the more disruptive the proposal is, the more difficult it may be to get that ruling or determination that it does not constitute a conversion. So the more it's directionally bored, the less above-ground facilities or support or damage or disruption, the better off we would be.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Councilmember Coughlin.
Well, obviously, Councilmember Keeley heard the disruption much different than I did. It's two different opinions about A, B, and C. I would be for B or C, and I would not be for A. So
Okay,
that's my position.
okay. Councilmember Gustafson?
For the applicant, if the DNR said, no, you can't do A, would you continue with C?
We have not developed full performas and cost analysis of B or C, so I can't tell you today B or C don't work, but we're very concerned about it. A private lift station and the costs that go along with that, that's a lot for a project to bear, so.
Well, I feel like I'm probably in favor of any one of these options if they can prove it's going to be safe for the environment to do it. And I know they do a good job with a lot of the borings these days. And we were just talking about Magellan. They've had issues too, that they had some pipeline that they had to take care of, but part of the caveat is they also pay for going into our parks and our streets and tearing them up to take care of it, as there is a problem. And that would be something I think I'd like to look at you guys having to take responsibility for if we go that direction.
Sure.
Okay. Ryan?
I would just like to point out, with this, there'll be approximately, if it's 138 units, there'd be likely to be about $500,000 in park dedication.
Yes.
So the concept is, if they're gonna build the trail, that would be put towards the trail. So it's not a,
That's
if I
right.
have, we understand, we can't ask for $500,000 in park dedication and then say
Plus a
build a
trail.
trail in the park. So we understand that the situation would be.
Yeah.
And then, I guess our thought is, okay, we're allowing them to go through our park. Our park then can get the benefit of the trail, is why we think B does have some merit, and maybe that would, you're thinking maybe different.
Definitely change the parameters.
Yeah, okay.
For me, as I look at all of this, there's still a lot of work to be done between you, the developer, and our staff on this particular issue. But if the majority of the council would say you go to A, here's one thing to our attorney. I want to make sure that the people of Burnsville are not going to be held to any maintenance issues, that agreement will be so clear that nobody can say, because we know they might be the developer, but 2 or 5 years from now, they sell the property to somebody else. I want to make it very, very clear that whatever happens to any of those underground utilities, it's on them, whoever. So in closing or selling that property, they know the risk of all of that. That the people and businesses of Burnsville are not going to be on the hook for any of those disruptions. And so the other part that I'm hearing is that when you look at the park dedication, now, again, tell me how the trail from the apartment is going to be, you're not going to be using any of the park dedication on any of that trail. That's a private trail.
Madam Mayor, the trail I'm talking about would be the one skirting around the outside.
I see.
The
Okay.
yellow line from the.
Yeah, the yellow lines.
From
Okay.
the boat ramp up and then follow the red on down. So it'd be for all the users
Okay,
outside, users of the facility, along with everyone else who likes to go around the lake.
yeah. The other part is that if you're going to be building a trail system from the apartment building entering into our trail, please let everybody know, and it should probably be in the agreement, that it becomes a public trail and the members of our community can use it. If that's going to be part of what you're using it as an amenity for your project,
Yes, ma'am.
because it has access to our park.
Yes, ma'am. And that, the original thought on the trails, again, also to back up, we share the same concern. Our interests are aligned in protecting this Oaks event in this area. It's a tremendous amenity for the folks that are going to live in these units. We're not interested in causing harm to the amenity that we sought this site out for. Our thought on the trail connections to the park were yes, we'd like the residents and the church to have access to the park. They have it now informally, but it would be nice to make that connection. Certainly, they would be shared, but a lot of the trail, I just want to be clear, this discussion started, if A were an option, we said, hey, maybe we cut the trails through as we work through, and now I'm hearing that that's probably not desirable, so we probably wouldn't do any more trails through the Oaks, Savannas, and otherwise, but there is an upland portion of the park adjacent to the church that we could extend trails into, and yes, the public then would have access to those components.
Okay, because I think there are some other species within the park, Mr. Beck, that is identified in our background, that are indigenous and that are also protected species in terms of what we do? Or am I reading that incorrectly? Yes.
Basically, I would say we
Mr.
would fully evaluate the situation. We know that there's a lot of high-quality oaks in the area.
Yeah.
It's not fair to call it a high-functioning oak savanna at this time.
Yeah,
But
no.
there are a lot of oaks. We would evaluate any sort of impacts with
Okay.
what is in the area where the impact
With
is
the other
proposed.
plant species within the area?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Madam Mayor,
Because I
follow-
did have a call from a resident in the Crystal Lake area who's concerned about the shoreline, and also some of the species because they walk around there. And I did go around and walk that trail. It goes all the way around and everything. And I've done it before, but I did it recently just so that it refreshes my memory about the trail within the park. And I entered from the boat launch. So I parked at the boat launch and walked all the way around. So, yeah, it's a pretty special
It
area.
is, we understand. And if I could just add it, and again, we share that concern, and it should be noted that the project doesn't come only with detriments to those amenities. We have currently a septic system serving the church that would be decommissioned and connected to public sewer.
Yeah.
That septic system
Yeah.
injects the water directly into the table. It contributes directly to the lake. That entire hard surface also drains directly down the ravines. There's a fair amount of erosion taking place and right into the wetlands and into the lake. That would all be collected and contained and treated within before it was discharged. So there are some improvements to the project as well that come with it. So we're interested in making the entire area better fit for the community.
So one of the things that I would suggest to my colleagues, have the applicant and our staff continue to work. And then also to our attorney that, and our staff, that now the request goes to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to ask if this is a permissible use, because I think that's the next action that needs to be taken, because you've done the research and we can
Madam
access,
Mayor,
yes?
I do believe that in order to approach DNR, we're going to have more detailed plans.
That's
so
right,
that
and
they
that's
can
why
make
I'm
that
saying you need to
decision.
move forward with the plans. And that's what I'm saying, continue the work so that we can do the request to, but you guys need to continue to do the work and to see what the best thing is. So I'm not ruling out any of the options that's before you. You just need to do the work, and then you're going to have to submit that request to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. So that's still high level. But you still need a lot of work to be done. Okay, Councilmember Keeley.
So we've established that there are sewer, water, gas, pipes, Met Council, et cetera, running through our parks. So option A does not establish a new precedent that hasn't been already established many times through many parks. That's
Well, it's a
according to
new
our background.
precedent because it's a private investor. The others are all public utilities.
The word public or private is beside the point. It's a park, and it's got utilities running through it.
Yeah.
And that exists throughout the city everywhere right
Yeah.
now. I mean, that's really, what we're really establishing is not, okay, this is private or this is public. It's, we already have a lot of parks with a lot of sewer, gas, water, except lines going through them. That's what's in our background. So that be the case, we've established that we're not damaging the environment. If so, we've damaged it through many parks throughout the city. So the proposal on A isn't any different than what we've already established throughout many other parks. I guess that's the point I want to make, is to take the severity away from A being such a bad option because it's so close to the lake or it goes through the Oaks. We have those examples throughout the city. We may not all know it because it's all underground and you never see it. Until you ask these kind of questions and you find the maps, and then you start seeing that we have utilities all over the place running through parks. So my only follow-up is, I want to make sure I understand, after Councilmember Coughlin's comment, what lateral boring impacts would there be? In other words, will there be any trees having to be taken out as a result of that lateral boring?
So our very schematic layout here contemplates one boring push the vast majority of the way, and then turning an angle and going the remainder of the distance. Where that angle occurs, typically you'll have some disturbance. Now, staff indicated if this is an option and it's still on the table, we need to dig that next level deeper and say what trees are where's the best alignment, where's the best place to come up and go back down again. I know you've all seen these directional bore rigs on the side of the road. They look like giant mosquitoes. It's a small tracked vehicle that goes at an angle. Well, when that line comes up, it has to park on the other side and go the other direction. So it's a pretty small footprint. It's not like we're bringing dozers and excavators and backhoes in there to do that work. It's pretty small equipment. So we would look to pick an appropriate location that minimizes that impact, make that trip above grade, plant the manhole, make the next run out, and then restore that area. And if there's no place to do that, that might be a limiting factor, but we believe that there could be an opportunity to come along.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Schultz and then Councilmember Coughlin.
With this boring, will it be damaging to the root system as you're going through it? And if so, how can you mitigate that?
With oaks, you can't mitigate. You can't disturb
Yeah,
that root zone.
that's
So
My
we
concern
would
on that.
look to pick a depth and an alignment that avoids the root zone of those trees and the overall footprint of those trees if we can. Again, it's a dash green line that we said, hey, does this make sense? Let's look at the legal side of it. Let's look at the feasibility side. Now we need to look at the practical details and figure that out. But our hope would be, there's a substantial grade difference there. Our hope would be that we could get below those in an alignment that stays out of the footprint of the majority of those assets and mitigate that damage.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Coughlin.
Yeah, I'd just like to make 2 points to Councilmember Keeley's comments. Number one, a private entity benefiting under a publicly owned asset, that's a publicly owned asset. That's different than if other publicly used and owned assets go through a park is legally and intellectually different than a private entity benefiting by going through for a public park. I own part of that asset as well as the rest of the public. They don't own it. Met Council, as a public entity, has a right to do, subject to other public considerations, public utilities, public stuff. This is a difference with a distinction. This will open the door for the next private entity that has an issue going through a park in Burnsville or anywhere else. And so I'm suggesting to my council people, I hope the church can find a way and make some money and work it out. But at the end of the day, this does open the door. Again, whether it's cost effective or not, that's up to the church. But certainly, B, seemed like a reasonable option given the park dedication fee issue. Or C, to me, I would have thought B seemed reasonable. But so again, I don't want to leave the impression tonight that I'm still open to A, because I am not. So it's up to the four of you. If a supermajority takes that vote, then it's the four of you.
Well, I think tonight, it's not about taking that vote tonight, but
It is
directing.
for me.
Yeah.
I'm clear about this.
Yeah, no, I understand. But the thing that I'm hearing is that I think the supermajority vote that you need is changing the land use, not the utilities. So the land use is a different discussion, and I will get to that. But for this, I believe that staff and the applicant need a lot more work to be done, and then get to the ruling from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. But those are the three options. But they're going to have to spend the money on the three options, on how that would look when you file that request with the Department of Natural Resources, correct? If you're looking at all three options, Ryan?
Yes, that would be on their dime, yep.
Then it's their dime to do all of that work, that you have to do that work. Yes.
So I think just from the perspective of the applicant, they need to, and staff, they need to know that A is on the table pending more
Well,
work.
that's what I'm saying. They have
yeah.
all three options
Right.
that they have to do the work on, and it's their dime, and they're willing to do that work for all three options to send to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to bring back a ruling for us.
To be fair, only two have if we stay with C, we're in the right of way.
Yeah,
probably, but
when you say with
I
C,
get
you're
it.
in,
Yeah.
yeah, but the two,
The two options to
other
either.
options, you have to go to the,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, Ryan,
If you don't mind, I just want to point out, everything the engineer over there is saying is correct. This can be drilled, maybe 9 times out of 10 it's successful. But it's the reason why staff is
Cautious?
maybe looking very cautious, or maybe being, I hate to use overly, but conservative on this, is because if we do have a problem, we're not digging up open field, we're digging up the natural resource to get there. Let's say there is a big boulder under the ground that we just don't know exists. If you're going option B and digging up, then you're up, but here you're gonna have to cut your way through it. So that's the reason why we're being very conservative
yeah,
on this,
and,
in this case.
I get
So-
it.
So, I just wanted to point that out again.
Yeah,
And
no,
then,
and that's very good that you voiced that on camera.
and also if, he talked about fusing the pipe together, that means it doesn't have joints, which means there's a much less chance of failure. But once again, nothing's perfect. If it does happen to fail, they're gonna have to cut their way in, and dig it out. And that's many times that has to sometimes you can fix it from the inside, and as I talk about every year in street reconstruction, we try to fix them from the inside. But there are times where you have to go in and dig a hole.
Yeah.
And so there is differences between digging through the 100 years oak trees and open area. So that's why we're being very conservative on this.
Yes, and we also just experienced Excel, where they had
Yes.
one strategy digging up one way, and that didn't work, and they had to go to a different way, and it came before us again to get approval to do that. And that's when I told them that they need to go and knock on every door that's impacted, so that they know what's happening, because it is their property.
I'll just add, once again, in the strategy that they struggled with was directionally drilling. And
That's
that's
right.
not to say they're gonna have this problem here.
That's right.
I would guess 9 times out, maybe higher than that, this is gonna work and you'll never know it's there. But in this case, the 1 time out of 10,
Yeah.
the chance of failure may be more impactful than in other situations.
Yeah, and you're gonna have to do that work. And you're gonna have to pay the money to do that work, but it's important to us, and it's important to the citizens of Burnsville, and it's important to our lake, because that's part of the problem that I'm looking at. It's not just that, it's Crystal Lake as well.
Understood.
And we just finished and got clarity on a lot of that, and I'm not, after years of trying to get clarity on Crystal Lake, not going to go down that road after so many years of trying to do to get out of the impaired waters list there. So there's a lot of things for me that's impacting this. Crystal Lake is on the verge of coming out the impaired waters list, and this project isn't going to ruin that for us.
No,
There's a lot of money that's been spent, and we just had a big project over in Crystal Lake to get that done, when we had to dig a whole nother thing to connect it over to Keller. Yes,
And to be fair to
right.
the developer, positive, like you said, it's highly likely we'd have improved runoff with the development. So in all fairness, they would likely collect the water and treat it as opposed to running straight off now. So-
Yeah.
So there are definitely benefits.
There are
The loss
benefits.
of the septic system would be awesome.
Yeah,
So-
and I see all of that. I just want us all to go in with eyes wide open. And I want this very transparent, so the people of Burnsville know exactly what we're doing. And the people who are living around that lake, who I have received some phone calls from, also know that we are being careful and respectful of the environment and of that lake. Okay, so from members of the council, shall we continue to tell the developer and our staff to work on A and B, because C they can go through, and then do the work that needs to be done so that they can go to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to get a ruling?
Yes.
Yes, okay, yeah, yes, Mr. Farrell.
Sorry, I'd just like to make one quick comment to Councilmember Coughlin. I just want it clear, we proposed option A, but as Darren eloquently said, more work is still needed, and we'll try and minimize exactly where that bend will occur and minimize the disturbance as we go through this. What we tried to articulate here, and I think we have, is we paid the investigation, and it does look like we do have a path to go through the park. And with that we'll continue to work with you all to find the best path forward. Ultimately, it needs to be feasible for us to proceed, which you guys understand and appreciate your willingness to work with us on the Park Dead side. But we do feel there's a way we can do this together. We're not trying to draw a hard line here. This is doing the best we can with where we're at in the process, and we'll continue to invest and work with you all to figure out a path that
And you
works.
heard that there is consensus around the council for you to proceed with all of your plans for A and B, so that we can send it to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to get a ruling. Okay?
Correct.
So that's an okay thing.
That's a good thing.
Okay, now the next decision you need from us is a motion to change the zoning to high density. And that's,
Not a motion at this point, Mayor, that would require public hearings, but just enough so that the applicant knows.
yeah, but you need a supermajority in what you presented. So that, to me, is a zoning question. So what is it that you're asking us to give you direction? That we would all agree on a high density, because the zone is going to be changed at a public hearing?
I think for the applicant to know whether or not to proceed, if it's known that there's not support of 4 out of 5 folks for the land use change,
Okay.
that,
Yeah,
I think.
okay, you
is
don't
reas-
want a vote, but
No, not a vote.
it looks like that in your slide that you wanted a vote, and that's why Councilmember Coughlin was saying that you need a supermajority. But what you want to know is, what is the sentiment of the council on a zoning change to high density?
That's correct.
Okay. Are you okay with a high zone, with a change to high density?
Based on the 4 voices that affirmed moving forward
Mm-hmm.
on option A and B, that's kind of
Okay,
also
but I need,
includes, yes, we're okay with this project going forward.
does it need
Yes.
to be transparent?
Yes.
Yes,
I'm not sure we'd have had that last discussion if we weren't in favor of it, so.
Yeah. yeah, no. Bill?
Option B or C, I would be in favor of it, but if it's option A, I would not be in favor.
Okay, and I'm in favor of changing the land use. Okay,
And Madam Mayor, just to be clear, we would, because of the blockout at Met Council, we would probably make that application for the land use change as our next step, and we'll work with staff on timing and
you
where
know,
that
work
comes
with our
forward.
staff, because a lot of that stuff can be bundled,
Okay.
and you don't have to do it piecemeal coming into us, but our staff knows how to do that, so work with them.
Yeah,
Madam Mayor,
thank you.
Yes.
don't we have to do a comp plan change that we're in
Well,
the middle
that's,
of?
they have to do it, and they can do that, it's all, and they can
So they get
bundle
it
all
done
of
by the end
that.
of the year when we
Yeah.
submit our comp plan.
Yeah, Jenny?
Madam Mayor,
So
members of the
it's-
council, our comp plan is scheduled for a public hearing in September, so their application would come after that. But what
Yeah.
they're referring to is a moratorium that the Met Council has put on
Yeah.
comp plan amendment applications. Any
Yeah.
developer needs to get their application in by the end of the year. It has to go through our process, so
Yeah.
for the Met Council to consider it. So
Yeah.
we would suggest that if they want to make this change, that it runs separate from our comp plan process, because we can't have that process held up because of our own deadline, quite frankly. We've already put in 2 years into this, and if there's neighborhood meetings
Yeah.
and things that have to be considered with their project, I don't think it's in the best interest to have that hold up our whole 400-page document. So
Okay, so you're saying for this, even though our process is we can bundle it, have them do it separate, just like Healy Ramey is doing theirs separate?
exactly, and Madam
Okay.
Mayor, there's nothing to bundle it with at this point
That's
until we
right.
get through the lock-on. But if they
Okay.
want to do this first before that moratorium goes in at the end of the year,
Yeah.
we're happy to
Well, the
take that
church
through the
needs to do that,
Correct.
because they're the landowner.
process. Correct.
Okay. Okay. It's your dime to spend on that one.
I assume, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
as they do that, you'll want, we'll do some public meetings, of course, neighborhood meetings, probably with the Crystal Lake Homeowners Association will probably
Yeah.
want to be engaged in that comp plan amendment, so.
Yeah, please
This
do.
is all, that'll take some time.
Yeah, and Mr. Ennisbet is very interested in everything that's going on. You know, they've been long-term residents of the lake and have worked so hard for the lake clarity, so a lot of those folks would want to be invited to those meetings, even though they're more than 350 yards away, feet. Okay? So you have the consensus. Deb, is there anything else that you need from us on this particular item?
I don't believe so, Mayor.
Okay,
Thank you.
continue forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your time
Thank you,
tonight.
yes. Yes. I'm going to recess the Burnsville City Council because the next item is a long item for 5 minutes. And then we'll reconvene. We are now reconvened for the Burnsville Council work session, and the next item on our agenda is the max tax discussion, and our finance director, Kelly Stry. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council
Yeah.
members.
And is this the Kelly and Ryan show?
It is the Kelly and Ryan show, and with Jennifer Rohde as support. So,
Yeah, and good evening, yes. Good evening, Jennifer.
we're gonna do a little bit of tag team. I'm gonna give you just a quick overview of where we're going tonight, and then Ryan's gonna give you the CIP detail, because a lot of those things are the big things that our budget is built on. So first off, we always start with our budget process and where we are. We had a meeting back in June where we gave you the preliminary plan reviews, financial management plans. That was back in June. And now we are talking max tax. And max tax is the amount that people will see on their preliminary or their proposed property tax statements when they get them. So on September 4th, the council will need to adopt a max tax amount that will show up. You can go down from there on the tax rate, but you cannot go up. So the levy rather than the tax rate. And then in October, you will hear department budget presentations, and there will be a virtual open house, a video of what the departments do with the budget. And then in November, you'll have 2 meetings to discuss the details. You'll get your workbook, and then in December, adopting the budget. Tonight we'll talk about current service level funding. We'll talk about some economic development investment options that we have the beginnings of proposal for. We'll give you a little update on debt service and capital. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Peterson.
All right, thank you very much. As Kelly described, I'll be going through the capital improvement side of this. I'm going to first run through what Steve talked about last year in the 2017 discussion items. I'll give you a quick update on those, and then get into the 28 items. So the primary 4 items he brought to your attention last year was Southwest Burnsville streets. We've made a lot of progress there. We had the work session. We've had open houses. Our preliminary plans show we could do work out there in 2020 and 2023 without affecting things too much. And then, so our next few steps will be getting back out to them with policy changes stating we would do some cost participation on those roads out there. The post plus banners, this was that discussion to try to get a post up there down on Nicollet Avenue, right by 42, where we could have some changeable banners out for different events coming up. We have something on order there, so we hope to have something in by the end of the year, and then we'll have more discussion on what banners will go in there when. But that is moving forward. Recycling the city parks, this has really been a great improvement and a great initiative that you folks have approved for the city. We are collecting almost a 20 cubic yard dumpster every week of clean recyclables from our parks. So we're in all of our major community parks, and it's gone really, really well. So we've been very excited about that, and I think it's exceeded what we had planned for, and it was a great choice to move forward in that area. And the final thing was Nicollet Avenue and Trunk Highway 13 pedestrian bridge. This is that area where you're trying to get across Nicollet as a pedestrian across 13 as a pedestrian is very challenging. And then if the Orange Line station comes in, there'll be that synergy with the 2 transit stations. So this would have the either overpass or bridge for pedestrians and bikers that they could go over to get to the MBTA station. That one we've submitted a grant to the feds this year, and if we were able to obtain that, our capital improvement plans along with Dakota counties both shows cost sharing. So we could get that done if we get the federal money. So that's kind of the update on the items we had in 2017. So with that, I would move into 2018. So, I would just like to first, we talked about Jenny being here as assistant. I'd like to introduce, we got Jeff Raddick, our Assistant Public Works Director, and we got Dan Torbichoffer, our Street Supervisor, our Superintendent, both here to help support this if necessary. I'd also like to point out, they're the ones who have done all the work to get us to the point where, as we get later this, we could purchase these machines at this time to save to save a significant amount of money. They put a lot of effort to try to get it so that these things would be ready to be ordered, and we knew exactly what we wanted. But back in April, the council directed us to provide sidewalk and trail snow plowing in-house. And I bring up this slide, and this is one of the reasons why we're trying to be much more effective in this with the right equipment and doing this in-house. Our trails and sidewalks won't look like this after we're supposedly done. Also, it'll be much faster. During most snow events, we'd be able to accomplish it in 2 days, whereas we've all witnessed the 4+ days on mini events where we're getting larger snows. Oops, push the wrong button. So there's an item for your consideration later in this work session that would have us purchase these machines now. There is one that was scheduled for replacement in 2019 already, and then to do the plan, we need to have 3 of them total to make the plan work to be able to get things done in 2 days. On September 1st, the state contract for these machines is up, and we are hearing somewhere between 5 and 9% increase. So starting if we order one on September 1st compared to the last day of August. So if we order them now, we could save somewhere in the neighborhood of $33,000 to $40,000 compared to ordering it 1 day later. Another factor is if we don't get ordering these relatively soon, we're gonna have to lease some of these just so that we have a machine to do it this fall or this winter. If we, otherwise, we'll be in potentially worse shape than we were with the contractor if we don't have the machinery to do this. So, that's going to be the main push on this, is to try to get this going at this point for those reasons. I'd also like to point out there's lots of other uses. These aren't machines that get used 10 days a year and they sit the rest of the time. They come with attachments that we can be out mowing our trails, sidewalks, open areas. So we'd be able to use these around ponds, miscellaneous. So they basically just have a lot of other uses besides just sidewalk snow plowing. Just so you're aware of our plan in this area, we plan on hiring, so our seasonals could start. The plan includes 1 existing seasonal we had and 2 new ones. We would be able to have those on place in November. And then the full-time replacement person for anyone who would take on the sidewalk snow plowing main full-timer would start likely in January. And we can provide the service we want with that hiring plan. And then the question is, what are these folks gonna do if it's not snowing? And we're not hiring 3 people to just sit around, are we? And the answer to that is no. We have had some things we really wanted to get done that we don't get to very often. One of the main things that has great synergy with the sidewalk and trail snow plowing would be clearing. So winter's a great time to remove vegetation. This is a picture of Early Lake Trail in the summertime. Before they did any clearing, and this is the after. And we could, if we're getting a not such a snowy year, we could go around to many of our trails and have them all looking like that. So by the time spring rolls around, the trails are much more enjoyable. Virtually everyone wants to be walking down a trail like this compared to something like that. Just some examples of current situation. This isn't a park trail, but these are street trails. We also would be working on street trails, getting these things back, lifting this up. So we'd be doing a lot of those things. We just sold the AAA property, which is awesome for the city. Hopefully we get a great development of it from Public Works, that we did use that as a dumping ground for snow in the wintertime. So these folks would also be helping us haul snow over to our other place in Cliff Fen Park, where there's a big parking lot over there. So these folks would be able to do that. We would have less disruption to other divisions. So if we get a big snow event, the sewer and water folks and the park folks all join in together. If we have these other people, after the sidewalks are plowed, we would be able to have much less disruption to their operations. We can start plowing, doing the rinks and all those sorts of things without having to affect that. Also, if it's a really snowy winter, we got to push snow back. So we have room for the next snow to come in, and these folks would be helping us with that. So I guess my point is there's a lot of things besides just sidewalk snow plowing that these people would be doing. Also, this the full-time position is partly funded out of the stormwater fund. That's because we're getting into more of a maintenance of our existing system as opposed to trying to get all these very large, expensive systems in. So that's the basis behind that. This person would be doing a lot of stormwater management things. So things like they would fill out our crew to be repairing catch basins, obviously taking drainage, and we wouldn't have to contract out so many of those. And then also operating perhaps that piece of machinery we talked about around ponds to keep those clear and available for maintenance if it's necessary. Inspection of our existing best management practices would also be part of it. So basically, there'd be a lot of stormwater stuff that this person would be working on in the summertime as well. Therefore, the funding, not out of the general fund for that half of the position, but from the stormwater utility. Oh, keep pushing the wrong button. So with that, there's an item later right after this that would be approving the purchase of those 3 sidewalk snow plowing machines. I'm sure you have some questions on the financing funding. Kelly's going to go into those in hers. So to me, it would wait. I would request you wait on hold or asking those types of questions. How are we paying for it? Fee, whatever, till we get there. But this may be a good time to ask, is there any questions about the machines, about potentially ordering them up?
Any questions for Ryan at this time? Okay. Yeah.
Can you go back to the
Yeah.
slide with the, your opening slide
This one?
there? One of the main drivers of my motivation to move away from the outside contractor is what you witness. I have, and I'm sure it's all of us feel the same way. It really, the point really gets driven home when you know some folks in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And you see how clean the road is in this picture. The road is passable by a wheelchair. The sidewalk is not, which
It's high
doesn't
risk
make any sense.
and
I
liability.
mean, we're forcing people out into the street where we don't have a sidewalk, but we're also forcing them out in the street where we have a sidewalk that is so poorly plowed by the contractor that it isn't passable. It's not very fun to pass as a pedestrian walking. The Enable have a real serious problem with that. And I've heard complaints year after year after year. And when this subject came up, it became very evident that we need to make a change. Cost increase, absolutely. But the fundamental core purpose, I believe, of the city is to provide safe and clean streets and sidewalks. And we're not right now in the winter, and especially not for our Enable folks. And I've heard the last complaint I want to hear. I'm hoping that we can figure out how to get it done, but we have to do better than that, because that is terrible.
I completely agree.
Okay, any other comments?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just move on to the rest of the capital improvement plan. In our fleet area, some of our challenges are that the tariffs may very well play a role in increasing prices. That could be what's going into those machines, that in the increase is the risk of a tariff putting on the steel that's associated with that. So right now, the fund does not include an increase due to tariffs. This fund suffers from low fund balance. That means we have very little flexibility to make modifications or be very dynamic in this area. And then we're always getting some type of new requirement, oftentimes in public safety, where now we have to put the stretcher in the ambulance, and it just, we get one thing after another. So that's some of our challenges in our fleet area. We continue to work through them, but you should just know that those are out there. Sewer and water, this will not affect the general fund in any way, but a couple projects. We plan on updating our SCADA system. This is just a screenshot of our existing system. Basically, you can measure, and our people at home can be, our sewer and water folks at home can be checking out what the height of the water is in a water tower. And then one of the best parts about it is that it has warning systems. So if you start losing water pressure, that we can be advised of that. The current system has no redundancy at all. If it fails, you may have heard the past year, Blaine,
Yeah.
two times in a month, I think.
Yeah.
They suffered where the water literally came all the way down, all the water towers came out, they had to close school, because they had to put the boiling water on because.
It's not gonna happen in Burnsville, Ryan.
I can never 100% guarantee that, but this will go a long way towards,
No, I understand.
towards
We need to
reducing
make
our
some-
risk. So this would
Some
be a new
upgrades.
item, a new capital item in our plan. It's approximately $400,000 to update to the latest and greatest, but that would get us redundancy, improved technology to work with smart phones and tablets and all those sorts of things. So we are pushing out, or should we get our capital improvement plan approved, we'll be pushing out a lift station expansion or rehabilitation. The other item I'll point out in sewer and water is the Heather Hills Water Tower. In 2019, 2020, we were planning on washing the outside and then repainting or resealing the inside. As it turns out, we're having more exterior problems than what we had known. So this project will be requested to turn into both exterior full repaint, sandblasting, and interior. The cost for that's around $3.4 million. We already had budgeted 2.1, so we're working on our capital improvement plan to make sure we don't have any rate increases to do for this, but that we are still doing the most cost-effective thing to go through the inside and outside and then have to take all the antennas off again 5 years later to resurface.
When was the last time we did this particular tower?
2008, we power washed and coated the outside.
Yeah, we just power washed it. We didn't do the blasting and the interior work like we did in one of the other towers in the 90s.
2008 project was a full interior rehab, but it was just a partial rehab of the outside.
Okay.
Another benefit is we'll have the new logo on there, so we'll get that updated. But basically, that's the two items in our sewer and water that I wanted to point out. In the street division, our streets replacement, this is the border with Lakeville. This is, so Lakeville contacted us, said we're rebuilding all these streets that are adjacent to Burnsville. This is like Blue Bill Bay Road, right off of Lac Lavon Drive over here. So we're already planning on reconstructing these roads in 2019. And we found a way to basically include these as well. So we're getting full replacement or resurfacing of all the roads that are inclusive of this area. This is like Maple Island Road, if you go out into the island. We thought we'd get a lot of concerns over, if you're fixing this side up, why aren't you fixing this side up? Because the roads are equally poor and they were built about the same time. So you'll see things coming through on this, but Lakeville and their consultant are primarily handling the project for us. We're just finding ways in the capital plan to make this all happen, which will be a benefit from factor of scale and all those sorts of things at this time. And
Okay. Councilmember Keeley?
What year is that? Did you?
this will be 2019
2019?
project.
I did, ironically, I was just in that area recently and I heard some complaints and I'd asked if they had called the city and the gentleman said he had and he thought it was a few years out. It was on our schedule, it was maybe 5 years out. It's now gonna get moved up to 2019 as a result of Lakeville and what's going on here.
That's 100% accurate.
Okay, they'll be happy to hear that.
They will be, those
The
roads are
assessments.
needing the work.
I think they will. They're pretty disappointed with the quality of the streets, so.
The other item I'm bringing up is you've seen this project on several occasions, that we're trying to relocate Cliff Road here down where it's the stop condition and the trucks back all the way up into the Kramer Quarry, where we go down here and then built a roundabout at 35W Cliff Road. Therefore, they'll have a lot more mobility in this area for our
And
streets.
safer.
Much safer.
Oh, my God, that's awful when you exit and you want to go east on Cliff and the other car doesn't want to yield
Yeah.
when you're the one coming off on the ramp.
There's no easy movement here, and some of them are very difficult. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're heading east and then want to go south, you really got to be watching from both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
this would be a great project.
tricky.
Also, this is a good economic development project because eventually we'd be able to potentially vacate Cliff Road here, and then we wouldn't have these two separated by property lines. So hopefully, long-term, this fits fully into our vision for development. This project is also in for the same federal grant application process. Dakota County shows their portion of local match as well. So we've gotten good support from Dakota County on both of our projects we're hoping to get funding for. In the stormwater utility, the only thing I'd bring up here is we've got some money planned for our updating our sustainability plan. We've done such good work in this area. We've met most of the things that we want to do. So it's time to update this and figure out what else we can do in this arena, make it citywide. So this is not just stormwater. This is citywide sustainability, whether it be these lights, anything that you can imagine, both financial and asset sustainability. So that'll be in there for 2019. Park discussion. I'm gonna get into a couple slides on this just to give you a good feel for some of the stresses the Park Capital Fund realizes. But I'll just start with a couple examples. So Lake Marion Regional Trail, we received federal funding, and the reason why there's so many colors here is because we've had so many challenges. So far, we're just gone through planning process. As it turns out, there's a so for your orientation, this is kind of 42 Burnsville Parkway, Judicial Road. The Ames Business Center is right there. Boulders are these townhomes. So it goes from Sunset Pond Park over to Savage Border and Kelleher Park. The original application had it going around Judicial, behind the Ames Center, under the 42 underpass. And this has turned out to be much more complex and expensive than originally planned. And then going through here, there's some, this is one of our #1 wetlands. It also has some constructability problems and more natural resources than we had known. So basically, we're still working with our partners, Dakota County and hopefully the federal government, to find a different way to do this. But this project had about $500,000 in park CIP funding for it, and it may require some city funding to get under here, along with Dakota County transportation dollars. But more to come. Just describe some of the challenges you have of putting the trails
But
in.
isn't the railroad also impacted, and you need to get permission from the railroad on that one?
There is a way to avoid it, but as it turns, we're using, they don't own the entire underpass. They own a portion where the rail is. There is an area that we could use, but it adds a lot of expense, basically, is the story. And the railroad doesn't basically allow anything that's a permanent easement on there. They'll allow you to work in there, grade in there, but not something where they're gonna have to worry about a permanent.
No, they don't want to give up their right of way.
They do not. So I show you this picture just to describe some of the situations we're having in the park system. This was this year. I think it was in May. It was obviously very wet for a while. But all this wood that's down here used to be covering right over the top of this dugout. So this type of thing happens. And when we respond to this, obviously if someone would have been back there, that would have been, someone likely could have been killed or severely hurt. So when this type of thing happens, we put in the capital plan for next year and replacing 10 dugouts, and these aren't the fancy kind, it's $400,000. So it's just very expensive to maintain the park system. Another 2019 project is Alamagnet Park, to replace all the dugouts in some of our #1 fields we have, and then make a bunch of drainage improvements along with technology and security we're planning on doing there. This purple line is fiber optics. We plan on bringing fiber optic in through here all the way up, and then putting cameras and those sorts of things that we can use for security, Wi-Fi for the users. Potentially could start doing irrigation, smart lighting, those kinds of things. So we're planning on doing that in more of the parks, but this will be the first go around at that. The police department's extremely supportive of this. They have all kinds of times when they have to react, and if they had cameras, that could help just show what actually happened. The main building here had a theft in the $60,000 range this past winter. So we need some more security, and that's why we're proposing these kinds of things, especially when we have fiber relatively close. So here's an example of a renovation, a Wolk Park. This is a community park. It's not fancy by any stretch of the imagination, but things replacing the fencing, the dugouts, the playground equipment, the trail, those things alone are approximately $400,000, and that doesn't include any building repair, lighting, or irrigation system. So just to give you a factor scale, what it takes to renovate. The reason is this is just 30-year-old stuff out here, and eventually it might start looking like the dugouts I showed in the previous slide. Nicolet Commons Park in 2020, we have had a leak problem in our the brook that the kids play in for many years. We're going to really try to solve that. We don't know exactly what that's gonna cost. Right now, we just have a placeholder. Maybe it'll be something simple, but we're showing this type of investment in that park in year 2020. We still gotta replace all the signs. We've replaced some of them, of course, but to get to the remaining ones is about $250,000. And then I talked about getting fiber into Alamagnet Park. This is our network of fiber optics that we currently own. So what we're doing is evaluating which park is gonna benefit most by having that, and then each year try to get it into one of the parks or two if it's effective. So, just to give you, our park system was primarily built in the 1980s. Ongoing renovations are required. We've done a lot of renovations, not like we are starting at ground zero. We've certainly invested in the park system, and it is, we make investments each year. But you can kind of see the scope of what we own, of almost 2,000 acres, 20 of our community bigger parks, and then several smaller ones. Our CIP is spent primarily in our community parks. We dedicate around $500,000 to miscellaneous things like playgrounds, irrigation, lighting, fencing, and then bituminous paving. All the parking lots and trails is almost another $500,000 a year. We dedicate almost $1.3 million plus any park dedication. But so if you're adding together the $1 million, that leaves about $300,000 for something that's not renovations. So what that means is, if you're paying $400,000 for the trail on the first slide, that basically uses up all the funding we have for something new in the system. So this is not meant to scare or anything like that. It's just the facts
reality
of what the park system looks like. We can basically renovate what we got, but when it comes to providing anything new, it's very difficult. So I just wanted to go through that and just have a good understanding of our different areas of.
Thank you. Any comments?
I was just looking at that 1,700 acres of parks. Isn't the city only 17,000 acres? Somewhere in that area?
27 square miles.
Yeah, we're 27 square miles.
A lot.
We're only, 2,000
You got
acres.
640 acres in a square mile, something like that, is it?
So that's open areas too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that includes those 9 passive areas, which are.
Ginny will have the answer in a second.
I'll try.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, one of the things is that we need to all understand that
That's what I thought.
Yeah, all right.
we had put the parks capital plan on hold in 2009 and didn't fund it. And so a lot of the maintenance and also replacement did not take place because we didn't fund it. It is time for us to fund the parks capital plan, and we started doing that, Kelly, 2 years ago, when we started to fund it again?
You've made incremental investments
Yeah.
in that each year, I think almost every year since then, but it's taken a while to build back up, and then you have inflationary pressures now really
Yeah.
is kind of where we're at, I think, so.
Yeah, and the more we fall behind, the cost of this stuff doesn't decrease, it only increases. And so we need to make sure that we are good stewards of the people's assets that they charge us to be good stewards of. So, yeah. And it's these kinds of things that make people want to come and live in Burnsville. What kind of parks do we have? We talk about this stuff in other areas. People want to move here because of the quality of our parks, the amenities that we have. And so we have to make sure that we take care of them. So thank you for bringing this to the light of day, and we continue to look at it as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our park system is tremendous, and we just
Yeah.
want to keep it that way. Absolutely right.
Yeah, and especially when we're also saying that we want to bring more tournaments into our parks. Well, if the parks aren't in good shape, nobody's going to want to hold their tournaments here. But tournaments bring a lot of revenue to our businesses, to the hospitality business, to the restaurants, to the retailers, et cetera. So it's an economic impact. Okay.
All right.
Kelly, I
Shall we
think
move
it-
on to
yeah.
the budget discussion, more detailed? Just as a reminder, this is the same slide from June of the impacts, legislative impacts that affect us. There are no levy limits at this time. One of the big things we have facing us is police and fire pension contribution increases. Those are over the next 2 years, factoring in. Freeway landfill funding is out there. And just a couple other things that the orange line coming through, funding was passed, so those are good things. In June, we talked about preliminary projections and pressures and tax base information and trends, that stuff. I'm not really hitting on tax base information so much this time. That stuff was already discussed. As an update, we do check with the county, and they do change those tax base information numbers throughout the year. They keep updating, and actually just got a projection this afternoon, and it went up just a little bit. It was a hair. I expect them to go down every time we get a new iteration of it, so that was a pleasant surprise. And I guess that's
That's all we got?
yes. Yeah. This year, we didn't have a lot of new construction that hit the tax base, and again, there's a lag in that.
Yeah.
It's
a
as the
2-year.
it takes the project to get completed, and it depends on the timing of the completion on how that hits. So this is about $10 million of new construction. So that's hitting in 2019. This is just a historical view of new construction for the past 10 years. So you can see where we came, where we had some higher numbers before the recession hit, and we haven't had a lot of comeback in that area. The different colors are the different types. The blue is commercial and industrial, so we've actually had some more residential in the last several years. And then this is the corresponding how much new construction brings. So this was valuation of the new construction, and this one is how much tax they generate. So at the tax rates of each of those years, how much did the value provide in tax relief? Or to
Yeah. How much did the city get?
Good old days of the
Yes.
recession.
Dismal.
Not much.
Because of the lag.
I added this slide, just, it's some discussion the council has been having about investment in economic development, and so it provides you a little historical view. We don't know how much economic development, how much you would actually generate, that's, that's an unknown, but we can make some projections as to how much that would generate in taxes.
Clearly, there were some, pardon me, Madam Mayor, there's
Yes.
some big projects that were going on during the tip of the fall. And this is based on the 2-year lag, right? So 2008 showed a banner year. But
And some of those,
really, it was
most of
already
those
falling
previous
off, right?
years were similar in size beyond.
So 2008 hitting
2007.
our books is 2006 likely activity.
Right.
And if you remember, this is when the heart of the city started to come out of the ground. 2004 was the first building came out of the ground, and that was Grand Marketplace. And so that's what you see there in that blip.
And with that being a lot of TIF, is this realized money or actually money that was given back to the developers, so not necessarily realized in our?
I
fund,
actually do
right?
not think that the valuations that are in TIF districts are in this number.
So this is net what the
That's
city
after,
would have
yes. Because
collected and held.
they are set aside in the TIF district, so.
That's pretty impressive numbers then, based on what we're doing today.
That's about to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long time coming.
Then, as we talk about budget, we should always talk about what is our fund balance in the general fund as well. Where do we sit as far as reserves? we have, I'm actually gonna just skip ahead, and come back. There's another slide similar to that, but, I reworded this, particular slide from the one that you got in in your packet, because there were some questions as to, what we meant. We're not asking for a fund balance policy change. We're still saying the fund balance policy should be 35%, that's it. But to be in compliance with the current policy, the change that we made to move transfers into their own funds, actually freed up fund balance in the general fund, but didn't provide fund balance in those other funds. The fund balance should have followed those transfers to provide cash flow. So, since we're levying directly in those funds and we eliminated the transfers that were previously in the general fund, it ends up looking like we created a more available contingency in the general fund, and that we need, so that the top circle looks like we created more contingency in the general fund. And the bottom circle shows that we need less, so the 35% in the general fund is lower than we need. So we're just saying that we would like to distribute some of the funds that are in the fund balance in the general fund to the funds that it moved to. It would not be a change in total. The same fund balance, but it's just looking at it in total.
And you're not asking us to change the policy, because the policy is a good one, and that's what the rating agencies look at.
Right.
And it scores us higher because of that.
That's
And
correct.
we comply with the state auditor. So I went back and looked at how the rating agencies score the different things, and it is about our 5-year budget, our financial policy, and our capital improvement plans that scores us higher, because we don't have a robust market value or a per capita income. Those
Yes,
are
the
things we
rating
have no
agent-
control over.
Yeah, and the rating agencies do look at all funds and whether we're
Yeah.
in compliance in total,
Yeah.
not just the general fund. So this just spreads that to the right funds. And it also doesn't give you the illusion that we have some available contingency that we should spend and reduce property taxes with in this fund, that this, it's no different than the situation we were in before. So we wouldn't want to get ourselves in trouble by spending some of that down. It's just moving it across.
Yeah,
Bill?
just so I understand, why didn't we do it before? Is that just something that didn't come up?
We honestly, we didn't think about it at the time on the cash flow side of that. It became, so property tax, because property taxes come in June and December, you have to have you have to have some fund balance to float that.
Right,
To
So,
catch-
but I'm trying to figure out why the delineation now and not before. That's
On the available contingency, where it's a little higher than the.
No, yeah, why didn't we go to this, why didn't it just stand out that we didn't go to this before?
I have the same question, and is it related to the balance going over 4 million, that it's just grown from 2 something up to 4, and you're looking at it, go, okay, how can we better use that to shore up other funds?
It was really just in the implementation of it. So once we got that, in 2018 was the first year that we had those transfers in there. It was an oversight when we were when we thought about doing the transfers and simplifying the transfers, we just didn't think about the fund balance following it. Once we did it and put it in those funds, and all of a sudden realized, hey, the rest of it should have followed as well. Yes.
Yeah, and it makes it transparent when you look at it all together.
Does that mean it was less accurate before and now it's more accurate?
I wouldn't say that it was not accurate previously.
I'm not talking about the numbers, but I mean, you're dividing in more categories. So I'm just trying to understand the idea behind it and then the result and
So previously, since general fund levied the property tax for some of those other funds, and we just transferred it directly over
Yeah.
to those other funds. We would transfer it January 1st to the other funds. And so the general fund then was carrying
Yeah.
the cash flow
I see.
from January to June.
you just didn't do it earlier, or you did it at a different
So,
time.
yeah, so the timing is, right, the timing is different now.
Okay, yeah, that.
It makes
that
sense.
Provides an answer.
Yeah.
So if I may,
Yeah.
the numbers that we're looking at are still based on the same sources, the 4.3, the 4.7, and the projected 3.7 at the end of
Yeah,
18.
in 28,
There is that much, call it excess tax revenue, that is sitting over and above our 35%, over and above the fund balance reserved for future uses, that is essentially unallocated extra tax revenue.
In the general fund as it is now, but we really need to move some of that over to cover the cash flow in those
Yeah.
other funds.
Okay.
So, if we were to look at all of those funds together, you added up the fund balance, you would have in total the same.
the same
It's,
month,
they're just in a different bucket.
different.
So in 2019, do you have a slide where you're proposing after these fund balances are switched, what does that do to that top color strip?
We have not done that yet. These are the numbers, it's well, in total there, it's between 775 and 925. As we prepare the final 5-year plans for each of those funds, we would determine what does each of those funds need for a fund balance. It's fairly clear in a couple of them. The equipment and vehicle fund, it would be 35% of the 2018 transfer. So the transfer is $1.4 million, and we would look to move 525,000 from the general fund into the equipment and vehicle fund. Same with the IT, it's 35%. The facilities fund actually wouldn't necessarily need to have a transfer because it has sufficient cash flow because it has franchise fees.
Yeah.
And right now we're that particular fund is building fund balance for future uses. So it really is, it doesn't have a cash flow need. So that allows the cash flow or the fund balance to remain in the general fund for general uses. So,
But you're already starting to build the facilities capital improvement.
Yeah.
And that's how you're gonna have to allocate some of those, cash flow funds.
And-
So you're looking at all of that long-term, because we have some facilities that need, I mean, we're just doing the ice center's roof.
the other revenues in that fund come in monthly, well, quarterly, I guess. But they're coming in a regular base, a more frequent basis, so they naturally provide more, their own cash flow for that particular fund. Parks Capital, that one is to be determined as we build this. We'll have a little bit more discussion about the Parks Capital Fund. As Ryan mentioned, all of the pressures on that particular fund. But there are also some park dedication fees that are coming in and sort of offsetting some of those needs. So I think it would be, it could maybe be only 200,000, or it might be the 35%, which is more like 350,000. So if you're supportive of us doing that, we would come back in the 5-year financial plans with the appropriate amounts. You can see what those fund balances look like in all of the funds together.
Well, that makes sense. You know what you're working with on a daily basis than we do. But it is about the policy side, 35%, and if you're gonna make those shifts so that it is transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan?
To close out that discussion, in simple terms, if we chose to do the 775 or the 925, either one of those, in theory, is that top unallocated blue going to then shrink
Yes.
by that
Yeah.
amount? And that's going to shift into the orange 35% bucket?
The 35% actually is as it is currently, so it shrinks the total column for the general fund. So the blue shrinks down by approximately, somewhere up to $1 million, up to that 900. So that shrinks and moves over, but the 35 has already been adjusted. This is really where we had kind of the aha moment. Why did we drop our orange bar down?
Yeah, with
And
the,
that's
the
because
overall
the
budget
total
going up,
budget in
how
the
does the 35 shrink? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
in theory, if your numbers continue to get bigger, how does the dollar value of the equation of that 35%, it can never really go down if your top line number is going up, because 35% of a larger number is a larger, orange strip, call it. And I can see where, that's the first time I've noticed that it's ever dipped down, so I kind of understood a little bit of what you were getting at. Just wanted to make sure I was clear on what was coming out of the blue
Yeah.
and where we're gonna end up.
So it was a one-time thing, because in 2016, the budget was larger because the interfund transfers were in the general fund. And then when we took the interfund transfers out of the general fund, its total budget became smaller, gave us a smaller 35%. But the other funds,
Yeah, and in that available contingency, let's all remember that available contingency, we want to make sure that we have money in there when we have natural incidents, and we need to pay for it right away, because anything that we have to apply for FEMA money for any of those natural incidents, we have to pay for it before they will reimburse us. And 1997, 1998, there's
98 May.
98, that took us 5 years before FEMA paid us back. So we need to make sure that we remember those things and that we don't find ourselves in that situation again. Yes.
I'm glad you pointed out, this slide usually has that 2 million, because we
Yeah.
have it designated
Yeah.
as 2 million for emergency,
Yeah.
natural disasters, whatever. And anything above that was a different color. Maybe it is blue and that 2 million was a different color. This is the first time I've seen that without that isolated, but that wasn't the purpose of of this slide. So we are, there's another section of that too. So in 2018, instead of 3.7, it'd be 1.7 would be the blue available for contingency after we isolate the 2 million for reserves for unforeseen crises, whatever it might be. Yeah, and I would assume that the council hasn't changed their position. We're still
No.
2 million on that.
No, that
Number.
policy is still intact, as I remember.
the 2 million is a rough estimate, and it has been 2 million for a long time. It kind of came from when we had some windstorms and
Yeah.
some floods in several years ago. While FEMA comes in and makes us whole on some of those expenses, if it qualifies, there's a city portion to those unplanned things. And there's also a cash flow. When FEMA does come in, you still have to fund it
Yeah.
and then get reimbursed. So,
Yeah.
so we don't want to leave ourselves short in
Yeah.
those situations.
Yeah. Bill?
Well, and even more important now, I mean, with inflation and cost of
Yeah.
goods and services
Yeah.
dramatically going up, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a minimum,
Yeah.
minimum.
Yeah. You're right.
Because
We
we've
have
not
to be
adjusted,
thoughtful.
we've not adjusted for inflation and cost on top of that at all, so.
Okay. All right, Kelly?
Okay. These are the uses of the restricted fund balance. So I'm going to pop back to the screen. So the green at the bottom is our restricted for sustainability activities. And that is the landfill revenues that we had a long time ago that were restricted 25% that have to be
That
used.
was by law.
By law, have to be used on sustainability type activities. So there's restrictions to what we can use it for. And as you can see, that green, it is going away. There's nothing being added
But the
to
law
the green.
changed, did it not? That we
It
didn't
did.
have to
It
take
changed.
those
So
funds.
the solid waste fees that we collect now are being used in the general fund and also in the AIM Center debt and operations to fund those activities. But we plan on that 100% in the budget. We don't set aside any more. So this is not an endless pot of money. It is being used up. You can see it at about a 1.7.
So everybody needs to know that we're still getting host fee funds from the landfill. The only difference is that we now, because the law allows us to put all that money into the general fund rather than having that restricted portion for the environment. The law took that away.
That's true. So we're using this in the same way that we have planned to use it in the past several years. So our operations for the sustainability fund, the Burnsville's portion of recycling program, and the general fund support that goes along with supervision of that function. And then also last year, you added the recycling in the parks, the 18,200 operations to do that. And as you heard Ryan say, that was a very successful program, so that's continued in here. That is definitely something it could come out of the general fund, but it would be in addition to the general fund budget. We have it programmed in here since it fits the criteria of sustainability. Another piece we have for 2019, there's a trash enclosure at Nicollet Commons Park and Ames Center that needs funding. I think you've heard about that particular item, or is it something we have to bring to you yet? I guess I'm not sure.
Yeah. Dana?
I'm not sure that we're still working through details, so I don't believe unless Heather, prior to leaving, briefed you on that. So we're still working through the details on that, but it relates to our organics collection and our recycling and the location of where that's collected, making sure that we're in compliance with our requirements. So that's related to that. So.
Okay.
So that's some funding that we've set aside here. If that project were to go forward, this would be one option for funding, partial funding of that. And then as we look at the unrestricted balance.
And everybody should know that comes out of the blue box, right?
This one, yes, comes out of the blue box. You're right. And Madam Mayor is referring to the top.
Yeah.
Blue.
Just so everybody knows.
And we actually do, I should go back, the red is also already reserved. So we're talking about the blue and the red.
Yeah.
Part of the box.
And the red is reserved for decisions that
Future
we made.
uses.
You've already made.
Yeah.
Or that are continued payments that we did 7 years ago, I think. 8
Yeah, the
years ago.
140 for the ice center.
Yeah. Was that about 8 years old or so?
I think
up
we have
there.
3 years left. So I think it was 7.
7.
Whoops, one more. So what we're referring to is the Ice Center debt service, where we set aside some fund balance to make some of the debt service payment that would normally be a debt service levy. Set aside an annual 10 years to pay on that Ice Center debt when that project was done in 2012, Jenny, I think?
2010.
2010? And then we also have some elections staffing. We've always taken our elections out of fund balance because it's something that goes up one year and down the next. And so that we, instead of putting that in the levy, which throws your levy up and down, we take it out of here. And then we were looking at, on the equipment and vehicle fund, one item that is a standout as a one-time expenditure is police radios replacement. That doesn't happen very often, and it is one of the things that's kind of throwing us. We thought that was a good option for use of fund balance, one-time funds. So when we look at this unrestricted fund balance and spending this, we are typically looking for things that only occur once. So we're not, if you were to add a position, let's say, that was going to go multiple years, we wouldn't want to fund that out of fund balance because it just kicks the can down the road and next year you have the same gap in funding. This is a one-time expenditure. So,
Dan?
Can you explain where that fund balance comes from?
the fund balance happens because each year we budget revenues and expenditures. The departments have an expenditure budget to live with. And maybe I shouldn't say never, but almost never go over that expenditure fund balance. So there's some savings usually every year, because they're managing their budgets as effectively as they can. And when we're budgeting revenues, we try to be somewhat conservative. We don't want to plan on something that's, unlikely to happen. We want that to be able to be within budget. So every year we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2% under budget in total, and that's where your fund balance really happens. So unusual revenue sources that might come in, savings, those kinds of things build every year onto the fund balance.
And when we refinance, we get some money out of that.
Yep. So
some savings.
Unplanned things. There are times we dip into fund balance for the year. So, for instance, in snow plowing, we don't budget for the worst possible year of snow. We budget for the average number of snow events. So if we have a very snowy year and we have to have a lot of overtime to do that, we're going to be using fund balance in order to do that sort of thing. And typically there are savings that in other departments that offset some of those things. In public safety, you might have a year where you have some investigations that really cause a lot of overtime. We don't budget for the really high year, the unusual year, because in that way we would have to raise taxes more than we need for most years. So we're trying to budget for that average year.
Was last winter considered a snowy winter?
That was considered a snowy winter. The thing, would you consider it a snowy winter?
Where we went into, we triggered overtime and additional plowing and additional salt and, all the
And really, winter happens in the budget year. We still have a couple months left of winter in this budget year, and some of that winter went into last year. So we're able to do a little balancing there as we make plans. So.
And Ryan, you can correct me if I misspeak here, because we are a city that's on hills. When you know that we're going to have a snow event, you also pre-treat the streets.
spray that.
Yes,
solution down.
Pre-treat the streets.
Right, what you do is you mix up water and salt
Yeah.
together and
then,
it turns into a
and
solution.
then when it snows, you're coming through and
It doesn't stick
Yeah.
nearly as much.
Yeah.
If it gets too cold, there's nothing you can do, but if in warmer temperatures, warmer being like 20 to 30, you can get it so it doesn't stick as much by doing that
Yeah.
pre-treatment.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on this use of unrestricted fund balance, I do have the total to be determined. As we are working through, so we're still in the process of working through a lot of details on the budget, as we normally are at this time.
and
and
you'll bring
looking
it
at
back to us during the budget work sessions.
Yep, as we identify other things that maybe would do that. But at this point, we don't have any other specifics. And it is also our goal as staff not to dip into this too much. Maybe just what we were talking about, allowing for that balance, not to, we don't want to skin it down to just that 2 million, because it does happen that you may need it at some point in time. So one bit of good news is that the Ice Center debt is we're planning to refund that. It is callable in December. And our first runs are showing that we'll probably have an annual savings of about $40,000 a year. So there are a couple different options to use that. The one option would be to not draw down the full 140 from fund balance and make that 100 for the last 3 years. So this particular debt is longer. I think, Jenny, it's another 10 years. Is that right? So the fund balance use that we planned was not for the whole length of time. You could extend it if you wanted to continue to do 140,000 a year, but it is scheduled to expire after 3 years on use of fund balance. If we could scale that back and make that last a little bit longer, or we can reduce the debt service levy. So there's two pieces of the 140 doesn't pay the full debt for the ice center debt. So there's a debt service portion and there's a fund balance portion. So we could reduce the debt levy. This is not something that we will build into this budget until we actually get the funding or the refunding done. We never want to count our chickens before they're hatched on this particular thing, but it is good news in the planning. I would anticipate that unless barring some really big swings in interest rates, that it'll be somewhere in that neighborhood. And they're usually pretty conservative when they tell us how much money we're going to save, the consultants too. So, yeah, it could be even a little bit more than that. So, and this just projects out that fund balance out a few years to
2022.
to what it would look like. Now, in the projected years, we assume that we're gonna spend all of the expenditure budget and we're gonna get exactly what we budget for in revenue. So the net is 0 because that's what we plan for. And then use of those items that we've already programmed in, what we were just talking about, what would the fund balance look like? And so, in reality, you can see it has grown over those years. There was the 1 year that we had the market value adjustment. That was a paper adjustment on investment market values and came back over the next few years. But the trajectory is going upwards, and that is because of what we were just talking about, that departments do save. They don't spend their whole budget on a regular basis, and we typically are making our revenue projections, revenue estimates. So I would anticipate the out years would have also a similar trajectory, but just assuming that it didn't, this is the commitment that would be made based on these projections we have. We always take a look at what our tax levy increases are projected for the next 5 years, given current service levels, things we know on inflationary pressures, those kinds of things. This particular slide is exactly what you saw in June. We do have some things that we're working on that we'll be giving you a different, hopefully a little bit more positive slide for when you get your final in November. But this is where you can expect it to be. In 2020, that is the heart of the city decertification. So that particular district will decertify. Their tax base will come back to the market value that the whole city tax levy is spread amongst. But there is also the corresponding timing of increase in debt service on the Ames Center. So when the Ames Center was built and that debt service was structured, we structured it knowing that that was going to happen in that year. So it's not a balloon payment, but it is a step up in the amount of debt that is going to be serviced. So it's corresponding to that same time frame.
And what people should understand too and remember, the 1.1, when it's decertified, part of the money that comes back into the general fund is not all of it, because the county needs to take theirs and the school district needs to take theirs. So we're only a portion of that, and I think there are other entities, but those
are
people
the
need
main
to just
ones,
understand
yes.
that
So
when we have a TIF, we're grabbing everybody's taxes, and then when it's decertified, it's all divided up.
So, and the The amount of TIF that we're expecting, the amount of tax base that we're expecting to come back is pretty much equaling the amount of debt that we're planning
Yeah.
to service additionally, so
Which is a good thing.
there, yes. My point being that there isn't additional money coming back with that, so.
Yeah. But it's covering.
To give you some perspective on what does it take to move the needle on the property tax levy percentage, just to make a 1/10% difference in how much the levy increases or decreases, that would mean about $33,000. So if you wanted the levy to be reduced by 1/10%, we would have to cut or find different revenue for $33,000. If you want to move it a whole percent, that is $327,000. So while 1% might not sound like a big change, it is $327,000, and it's quite a bit. So this is what you saw in June, is that we're projecting 4.9. The majority of that is in the general fund, 4% to fund current services. The other adopted plans, capital plans, and the EDA fund, those make up the rest of that. We are a service organization. The things that the city does is mainly people related. And so increases in wages and health insurance and those kinds of things really have a big factor in how much tax levy goes up. This is a little bit more detail on that. So when I just mentioned employee services, we're looking at health insurance increases, workers' comp increases, and unemployment insurance increases. Para for police and fire, I mentioned earlier, their rates went up, and that's statutory force. That's not something we have a choice on. And another pressure we have is seasonal wages. We have not increased our seasonal wage rates in quite a while, and we are running far behind the people that we're competing, the other cities we're competing with, and other private employers we're competing with for those seasonal employees. And Mr. Peterson's areas have had difficulty filling positions this year. So we're looking at seasonal wage rate increases that it could cost up to $100,000 in public works and recreation.
Kelly, this is really nice. This is the first time that you've line item the pressures, like in health insurance and what that cost is. Usually it's like what you had in the other slide. It's 4% is employee service. But here you're saying, here's what those pressures are, where that 4% comes from. So, yes, Bill.
Well, and just to point out, the SAFER grant endings is essentially almost a full percentage at the cost of $300,000.
It does have offsetting revenues, so.
Right, but that was not a high
Yeah.
number. I mean,
Was it like 110? Did I remember seeing, or
no, it's.
not that big?
The Medicaid reimbursement is.
Yeah, the revenue that the two additional firefighter EMS were
Oh.
gonna generate because
Yeah.
of the billing, et cetera, there was a number, and I
Yeah,
tried to think of what it was.
it is, it's actually probably, we're still working on that particular number. There's a lot of moving parts to EMS revenue. But we did have the additional Medicaid, reimbursement you were talking about. Because we have more runs, we are having more, revenue collected from EMS. And the net effect of those are gonna be somewhere around zero for those SAFER grant.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
good. So there's a loss of 300 from the revenue from the intergovernmental, the grant.
Yeah.
But in the non-tax revenues, that number actually has some EMS that goes the opposite direction, even though that's a positive number, it goes the opposite, there's some,
Yeah, and I'm looking
Offsetting.
forward to Chief BJ's when he's before us from his department, because also what we all need to understand, every time we add senior housing, there's an impact on those runs. Bill?
Correct, and it's a negative impact on those runs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, then why don't we have a net number instead of a hard number? We have a gross cost added to the 4.9%, which essentially is almost 1%. When you're sitting there telling us we have a revenue offset, so why don't we have a net number? Why don't we factor that into the levy?
it's just how I presented it, actually, so, it is in 3 line items. You've got the SAFER grant ending, the net increases in non-tax revenues. There are some ups and, the EMS is built into that, so, that probably would have been a better presentation if I had combined all of the EMS ones together, but they are all within these numbers.
So,
The
It is a
200,000
net.
net.
okay,
Well, it says 240 is net increase in non-tax revenue, but the SAFER grant ending is a cost, not a revenue. So is the 240 a revenue number or an expense number? I mean, is it in other words, it's net effect, is it a net cost
It's a-
increase of
it's a-
240?
Because that's a positive number, it probably should say net decrease in non-tax revenues.
Oh, so
So there's a lot
in the
of different-
total, it's actually subtracted,
Yeah.
okay. A minus sign or something,
Yeah.
yeah, gotcha. It was, looked like a $240,000 added expense as opposed to a $240,000
because usually once you
credit
put
or
it in
revenue.
parens
Yeah,
for a,
Yeah, like you
It's
did
a
on the
credit.
transfer of EMS vehicle, was a credit of
or are
200,000.
we
Yeah.
missing something?
The non-tax revenues
Yeah, 'cause
are
it-
multiple sources, and some are going up, some are going down. And so the EMS are going up, but we have other ones going down.
Oh.
So it is an
Yeah.
increase. The 240,000 is a plus cost, correct?
Okay,
Contributing, yes, to the property tax pressure, yes.
yeah.
Got it.
so it's
Contributing
net
to the
of the benefit of the
Yeah.
revenue from the EMS, right?
Right,
We-
but it's
we
a
see-
net
Yeah.
increase.
How many different funds
If I
are-
had pulled out the EMS portion of that and put it up straight against the SAFER grant, you would see something more closer to a zero with the SAFER grant piece of it and a higher number as a
The
decrease
EMS.
in other revenues, so.
Well, I've-
So it all is factored
Yeah.
in, and these are again, high level and projected, and we're working on those numbers, as they're coming in. Particularly EMS is a little bit slow because it takes so long
Yeah.
to collect revenues through, medical. It just
Yeah.
is a very, lengthy process.
Yeah.
So we're waiting for, we just like to wait for another month's worth of, so we see a little bit longer period of time. But
Yeah,
The
Dan,
good news
Kay?
in what you just said is, because I don't remember the number being anywhere near 300 of what BJ presented when we did that SAFER grant decision. He said there's going to be, and the 110 was a number in my head, so we knew we had a net 200 roughly added cost, even factoring in those revenues. What you're estimating, and I know this is not solid numbers, is it could be as high as 300, in other words, washing the $300 additional cost of the additional firefighters with additional revenue
That
of
doesn't,
almost 300.
for capital, and for the cost of the 2 additional vehicles and some other costs.
Yeah,
The SAFER grant only did the labor costs?
yeah,
they covered labor, we
Right.
covered,
The
the cost of the capital.
equipment,
yeah.
So
The
we've
So this
had-
is the
the
labor
equipment.
portion, right?
We've had increased revenues over that period of time. It's been, so we've already had increased revenues. And those increased revenues and some fund balance paid for the vehicles. And now their increased revenues are gonna start paying for the people.
The people, right? And you're saying
So-
it's potentially as high as 300
Well,
in additional revenue?
the line right under net non-tax increase or revenues, there's a transfer for the EMS vehicle, that happened last year, so that's offsetting. I can see, I can be much more clear on exactly what is EMS on the next round. I will give you, and we can get back to you on exactly what the
Yeah.
pieces are related to the EMS versus,
Well, and we're looking at the net, what's the net driven by the additional 2 EMS workers? And basically what you're saying is it's turned out to be better. The revenue side of adding those 2 has turned out to be much better than what we might have thought 2 years
Yes.
ago or
Yep.
3 years ago when it was presented and we decided to move forward on it.
and I
It's
think
good.
we,
It's good news.
Yeah.
we thought it was going to be good, but we didn't want to count on it being,
You want to be
Yeah.
we didn't want, we wanted to be
You're always very
conservative.
conservative, Kelly,
Yeah.
On the-
as long as I've
On
known
the
you.
revenue estimates, we're very we try to be
Yeah.
conservative because,
Sure.
again, you don't want to count on hiring those people and then it doesn't turn out and we need to cut
Yeah.
back.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had equipment to take care of and all of that. If you, when we presented it the first time, it covers a 3-year period of time. And, so, there was use of fund balance in 1 year, and then there were revenues that were paying back some of that fund balance, and the capital was being covered, and there were 3 years of things that we
Moving.
spread out. And now as it's coming back, those revenues can go towards the people.
Yeah.
So,
I'm less interested in the cap cost because it's a one-time and we're amortizing it. It's really that $300 labor increase. To
And-
get close to that or even really close to that and offset with revenues is fantastic news.
and one thing we have to remember too is that we do have to replace, now we have one more ambulance to get into the replacement schedule, putting more pressure on the equipment and vehicle fund, which then has to have property tax levy over the years.
And
So
we've
we can't
heard
forget
that.
about that.
Right.
And
It
we've
isn't,
heard that.
they are, ambulances aren't a 15-year vehicle by any,
Yeah.
I think they're more like, do you know? 8? 8-year vehicles, so it does have an effect.
I just keep hoping that it was a smoother ride, but it's not the way that they do it.
Did you have a bumpy ride?
No,
Did you have a
Is
bumpy
the
ride
240
in the
supposed to be a
ambulance?
minus?
yeah,
I'm just saying.
From Buck Hill?
all the way to Southdale.
Minus the 200, this includes 1968.
Oh, no, it was over to Hennepin.
HCMC.
Hennepin, HCMC, because that's where,
Punctured lung. Huh?
yeah.
All right, I think we've talked a lot about this, just what are the
Yeah.
things that are affecting those out years when we make those projections, so similar stuff that we've had. And this is just another, discussion on what we just discussed, so. This is a new slide, that we didn't give you in the handouts, but it talks about FTE changes that we have, included in the estimates or not include, that would be on top of. And one position that we are looking at is an IT technician analyst person. The IT department has a reorg because of a retirement, so there's some, looking at, that it would be a net, one new position is what, would be ideal. It would provide citywide additional support. So this is something that's benefiting all of the different departments. There have been so many systems added and so much more technology. Every year, we've really leveraged technology to make every department more efficient and effective and added those kinds of things. That does have a support
You need
component
people.
to it. And it is something that we've heard across city departments that this is an important position or a need to allow departments to continue to leverage the software that we have and the systems that we have most effectively. Because it just has been a stretch. to get-
Software doesn't fix itself.
Yep. So the net change, with the reorg, with the retirement and reworking things, the net change would be $62,000. Our hopes would be, to cover that with some savings that we come up with, but at this point, that's an add. And then, economic development, you've had some visioning on economic development and some presentations from a consultant about the staffing, how we are staffed differently than other cities, and some of the opportunities that might be available if we had additional staffing. And I have some slides. I would say on this one, let's wait till we get to a couple additional slides a little bit later to talk about how we can do this with not a very big increase in the budget. So what we're looking at here is just an additional EDA levy of $25,000 in 2019. So the plan was $25,000. This would mean $50,000 in 2019, and then changing that annual increase to a 5% increase. So we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. We already talked about the FTE changes for the maintenance worker and sidewalk snow plowing. That would be half from the general fund and half from the stormwater fund. We would increase sidewalk snow plowing fees for the benefiting properties. So because there's additional fees or additional cost associated with this service, the enhanced service, the fee would go up. We have a whole bunch of slides on that as well. And the general fund contribution, which has been there before to fund sidewalks and trails that run along parks and city properties and that, we would continue proportionately the same with benefiting properties. So in the past, it's been about 72% of the trails are next to people's property, and they have a obligation to clear their trails. We would do that for them, and we would take the other part of it in the general operations. There's a couple different ways of doing that, whether it would be a fee or whether it would be in the property tax, but we'll get to the slides on that. And then within the general fund, it would be a zero increase without capital replacement. So again, we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. In the stormwater fund, the half FTE in the stormwater fund and that capital that we've, one of the machines being paid for out of the stormwater fund, the plan is that the CIP is being reduced for capital improvement to keep the rates within the planned 1% increase. So this position and the piece of equipment would maintain the investment that you've made in the stormwater assets, the improvements that you've made, and make those work even better than they do by maintaining them. And then we don't need to do as much capital improvement in those areas. So it would not be an increase in fees. We would stay within the planned fee structure. And then the other position we have in there is that gray at the, I was trying to do in every other color there, but that apparently didn't work. The GIS coordinator is in the gray at the bottom there. That's one FTE. That is a reallocation of currently what is being used as consultant costs. So the GIS program has been going on for a number of years. We've used consultants to get it up and running and leverage that, use the, get us going the best practices. We're in a point now where we can take that on ourselves at a lower cost and have be more effective, have more services right here at a lower cost. So this would be an addition of an FTE, but it would not have an addition to costs. It actually has a little bit of a reduction in total costs.
Dan Kay?
Can you go back to your what are the cost pressures page? Can you run through, it looks like the 1368 is a total of what's below it before you get to the funding adopted plans, or is it not? Is it, because the list below it doesn't add up to 1368, but I'm not sure that it was meant to, so I just wanted you to run through that and explain why those numbers are presented that way. And
I think I'm going to have to go back to this and get you a new list on this. I think maybe we made a change along the way to as Ryan was pointing out to me as we were talking here. that perhaps we made a change and it's not,
Reflected in
The-
the total or
the totals are correct, I do know that, but perhaps,
some of the numbers, that's, yeah, because that first batch doesn't total
Yeah.
1368.
I apologize for that. We most likely made some quick adjustments that didn't get vetted properly.
Maybe that net increase in non-tax is a minus.
It might be.
That'd be good.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I do know,
The numbers would still come out, but at least we would understand them.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do know that the totals are the ones that agree to all of the work that we have done behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, the grand total
Is
is
correct.
the number.
What you're saying is you're highly confident of the 4.9%, the 1.6
Yeah.
Yes,
plus number.
Yeah.
yes. I am highly confident of that. Back to where we were. Any questions on the FTEs or concerns about
No.
those?
I just know that on the economic development staffing side, when we, is it 2009 when we had all those cuts? Jenny, we lost 2 FTEs in your department?
Oh, many more than that. I think
Oh, I
it was
know
like
that
4 or
throughout the
5.
years, yeah. But you also lost 2 during that, again, during that last cut. But in total, at least since I've been here, you've lost 5 FTEs. And I think you had those 5 during, when we were doing the heart of the city.
Correct.
And then after that, during the recession, we just cut a lot of those folks, and then again in 2009. And now that we're going to continue to do all the work that we need to do, you need people.
That's correct. Well, that's what we're talking about in our economic development strategic plan, is resources and boots on the ground. I will say that I don't believe this is comprehensive with what we're talking about on the economic development strategic plan. This is reflective of the 2019 budget, I think,
Yeah.
is Kelly, because there's more resources that are needed than what's
Yeah.
reflected here.
Yeah. Bill?
As I understand, Kelly, you're proposing a $50,000 in 19, 25 plus the 25, and then when you say thereafter, then 5%
Rather than the
Plus.
25.
in 2020?
Let's,
Well, that's what it says.
yeah, I guess that's a little further
You're looking
out
at a
here.
5% increase in 2020.
Right, that's
have-
what it says.
Yeah.
We have quite a few slides that will specifically go
Okay,
to
I
that, so
just-
I'll, yeah. Yes, 5,
Yeah, that seems to be what it says. I'm just asking to confirm.
Yes. 50,000 this year, and then going, instead of having a flat number every year, do a percentage increase each year from there.
A
Yeah.
percentage increase on the 50,000 or a percentage increase on the 25,000?
A percentage increase on the total EDA
Budget.
levy.
So it would be cumulative,
So-
so it'd be 2,500, and
It
then
could be a
it'd be
$40,000
Yeah.
increase.
then it'd be 52.5, and then it'd be 5% of that, 5%, 5%.
Got it.
No, I'm in agreement that we need more people in our economic development group. I'm not sure that I want it coming out of the EDA fund, though. I'd like to see it more in the general fund. I think that's where salaries belong.
And if you're looking for a comment early, I'd be against it anyway.
Okay. All right. Kelly?
Okay. Trying to remember where I am. I skipped around on my slides a little bit here. The plan is funding replacement costs of existing assets currently. It continues the strategies you've had, 50,000 in the ITF fund, the street maintenance fund's 13,000, parks capital 50, and the equipment and vehicles is, and IT and capital is 183 together. Facilities fund, no property tax increase planned on that one. Future pressures, the host fee revenue is something that is an unknown, but it's calculated in our presentation as going forward. The compensation study that is currently in place, we
Are
don't
you
know the
looking at the
outcome of
host
that.
fee that it's slowing down because we have a lot of airspace? Is that what you're looking at? Because it takes a long time for them
We
to
are
fill up that
projecting,
airspace.
we are projecting based on how it is coming in currently.
Yeah,
So that's what we have built in.
so it's just slowing down because of all of the reuse, recycle, repurposing of materials. Yeah, Karen?
Clarification, my understanding was we were looking at 3 to 6 years, and then it just bottoms out to what, 40,000?
Numbers I
That was
saw,
my
it's three, it runs 3.5 years, but it extends, it's going to extend 5 years because of the agreement with Dakota County, but it's going to bottom out at 30,000 a year for 165 years.
That extension is like ends in 2022 or something like that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like-
when, right, that's when the revenue goes to 30,000
We don't
from
have any
there.
guarantees after that
Yeah.
2022 period.
So
Well,
DEMCON
I
will
don't
take
know where
165
all of-
years to
yeah.
fill up.
So, what's the law on that, Joel?
In a couple weeks.
What's the law on that?
I apologize, I was not listening to that part of the discussion. What's your
Okay.
question?
On the host fees, as a community that's a host to garbage?
We're talking about it bottoming
Yeah, but
out
what
in the
people-
next 3
They're
to 6
saying that it's
years.
bottoming out to 30,000. I'm gonna call John Linkstein and understand that, because I hear all of these things, but I don't understand how that, we have an agreement with them, a PUD agreement, and they have to pay X amount of dollars. And now they're going to be looking at changing some of the uses of the different cells, which mean a PUD amendment. So
Well, Mayor,
right
if I
now,
understand
the
the question right, the statute allows a per ton
yeah,
charge. If they're disposing less, if there's
Yeah.
more processing of waste, they're still paying the same
amount.
rate on the amount dumped, but they're
Yeah.
dumping less, and so the revenues go down. Unlike many other situations
Yeah.
where increased number of people,
Yeah.
more use would increase the amount disposed.
Yeah.
We're doing enough recycling and other alternative to actually reduce the revenues in some
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
respects. It's not that they're paying a dollar-specific amount within
Yeah.
cost of living inflator. It's
No.
based on the tipping charge
No.
of how much is being dropped off at
Yeah.
the site.
I'm correct, the county has a program in place with them where they have a guaranteed fee through a certain
Yeah.
period of time. Whether they're dumping there or not, they're still gonna get paid.
Correct, that's
But
different.
we don't-
Ours-
But we
That's
don't
a
have
Ours
different-
is not structured that way, and the statute doesn't
have to be
contemplate
dumping
us
for us to
doing
Yeah.
get
it.
paid.
Yeah, the county has a different structure. They can do an agreement on a 10-year basis where ours is land use.
Madam
Bill.
Mayor, oops,
Yeah,
quick.
I'm gonna go to Bill and
There
then.
has been some suggestion out there floating that they may look for other alternatives and just choose to decrease it based on some other viable choices that really, at this time, doesn't involve us.
Yeah.
For the sake of time, this is probably a discussion for a future meeting after you've had a meeting yourself. And
Yeah.
some of these numbers are laid out where it'll make
Yeah.
sense to you.
Well, yeah, and I think with that, it'll be great to have the commissioner of the MPCA really identify that, so we have good factual information in terms of what all of that means.
It really does come down just to the cells. The 3.5 years, the cell,
I know.
the MSW cells are full, and so unless we expand them or change them,
But they're
there
not
won't be any.
full. They have airspace.
No.
Yeah,
No,
they
Madam
do.
Mayor, they
We
do.
have,
Kinda yes
we
and
have
no.
airspace.
I agree with you, Dan. You'd probably need to have a meeting with them
Yeah.
and talk about it.
Because I know what the airspace here in Burnsville, and so they can talk about how they need to fill up that. Because we've been wanting them to cap it off so that we can decertify the landfill. But they don't want to lower that airspace.
There's a lot
Yeah.
more to that.
Madam Mayor, I think some of the fellow council people have gone through a video presentation. I'll be doing that in the next 10 days. I got a call today. Do you want me to let you know when I'm gonna do it, or you.
So Waste Management is
going to
doing
put on
video
a
presentations
not
to
a video,
each
but a
council member.
slideshow, correct. And I think a number of council members have already gone through it, and I'm just saying I was contacted today, and I'm,
So I have not been contacted.
It's the meeting that I discussed with you.
Madam Mayor, members
Yes.
of the council, and to that point, I was actually drafting a note prior to this meeting to let you know that this is something that we as staff just became aware of, that this was happening. They did reach out to us to coordinate an effort between the council and the planning commission, and somewhere between reaching out to us to coordinate that, they reached out to
Each council
individuals on the planning commission and the council. So staff has not yet had an opportunity to meet with them, and so I feel at this point you all might have more information than we do. So we do have we do have times scheduled with them where we're working to solidify a date in early to mid-September, so staff can come up to speed on the information that is being presented, which would also include a tour. And we have encouraged them to consider doing a tour for everybody. That would include all planning commission members and council members, as well as staff as part of that.
Should also have the Parks and Natural Resource Commission, because this has to
Yes.
do with parks,
That's absolutely
natural
true.
resource.
Yes.
Yeah.
just
So
a point of
anyway-
information, I believe some of the council have already had that tour, and
Yeah,
that
I
is,
haven't.
well, again, it's
I've
just you.
had tours of that
I just have to
facility
say,
many
it's
times,
just
but
you
not
and
in
me-
this context.
You and me left, and if you want me to let you know,
Yeah,
I will,
please.
and I'm sure that you'd be welcome. I mean, I just happened to get the call today, and they happened to say, when are you generally available? And I said, generally I'm available, and I'm sure that it's not a secret. And they said they put on a slideshow, and then they give you a tour.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine.
That's exactly what it is.
So,
Okay.
Mayor, I'd be glad to let you know.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
Yep.
And I'll be glad to, and I think what I will do is invite John Linkstein, the Commissioner of the MPCA, to come and speak to us on this item.
Yeah, but I'll let you know when that invite.
Yeah.
As far as what we have built in to the budget, 2019 is I think a good number based on last year's number. We have, these updated projections would assume that the host fees that we've been getting are going in 5 years. So these are just those 5-year projections out. If it comes in less, then that would mean that you would need to backfill with either more property tax or some cuts in services in there. There is a piece of the host fee that goes into the Ames Center Fund and for debt service and operations. And because of the way that we have refunded recently, we are relying less on those and are directing the host fee to really it's going to be more providing capital replacement. So it becomes actually a good thing that is one of those things we aren't counting on as specifically for operations, but rather for capital replacement, we have some more flexibility in it. So just to answer that question of what we don't know in the 5-year horizon or where that changes, you'll have to make some decisions along the way. Okay, that's where we were back here. So the compensation study, we don't know the results of that or how that will be implemented. That is one of the future pressures. Commercial valuation remains uncertain. We still have a lot of tax petitions that are being filed and adjustments that are being made. And just how they actually value. So the tax petitions and commercial valuations kind of go hand in hand there. They have been pretty flat, and so. Some service level changes. This is the same list as we talked about in, well, I guess maybe there's a couple different things in there, but something we're looking for some direction from you. The NLC membership and conference would be $15,000. We don't have that built into the 4.9. The shopping center conference and attendance, 15,000. We don't have that built in either. Future capital funding for fiber to the city parks, that's about 70,000 a year annually. We have that programmed into the CIP, that much, at this point in time. But that does mean delaying other, park improvements. And then, the comp plan implementation ordinance reviews, we do have, some of that built in, so, those are some service level changes that we're implementing in. And sidewalk snow plowing, we'll talk about that as well. So sidewalk snow plowing, and I realize we're getting pretty well beyond, where we were, what we were planning on time-wise, so, basically, we gave you a couple options as you were directed us in April to look at, should we be having a citywide fee for the part that is city property, adjacent to city property, or should we absorb that into the general fund and cover that with property taxes? And what would be the difference there? And in a nutshell of all of these things, the fee on if we spread it as a fee on a median home is almost the same, it's basically the same as putting it in the property tax levy. We did compare the slide, I guess. When we did this comparison, we factored in that we would stay with a 72-28% split between benefiting properties and property taxes. We were factoring in what is the capital replacement in there as we did that. And it comes out basically a property tax increase of $1.59 annually, or a flat fee of $1.59 annually to all properties. So if that is a median home, so on a property tax basis, a person with a home that is valued less than the median home would pay less in property taxes, and one with more would pay more. And commercial properties, the same way. It's property tax is based on valuation versus a flat fee. So in a flat fee structure, a small business with a small, one unit versus a very large business with a high value, they're going to be paying the same on a fee basis, but on a property tax basis, it would be property tax wise.
Bill?
I'd rather have it be not paid on value, because what difference does it make if someone has a 2,400 square foot home,
Yeah.
or someone has on a 100-foot lot, and someone has a 3,500 square foot home and a 100-foot lot, so they have to pay more because their home is worth more. That makes no sense to me. They should just be per home, per whatever it is, flat fee. You get people use it the same. That makes no sense. So I'd be against the value-based.
Yeah, Dan, G?
I agree. I think a flat fee is the way to go. The entire city benefits from all the sidewalks we plow, and as we all take a share of it, it just kind of, it's very visible for everybody as what's going on, and people know exactly what that money's being used for. And if Ryan comes through with what he's telling us he can come through with, they're gonna see the results this year. And the wheelchairs will have a sidewalk to go down, and the people waiting for a bus can actually get to the bus stop to get to their buses. And I think as a city, we just share in that cost, and that's part of the service we do in our city.
Okay. Kara?
When we discussed this, we had probably a lengthier discussion than we thought we were going to have regarding property tax versus fee. One of the reasons, just one of them, why we were looking at the fee is because we want residents to have it called out specifically so that they can say, yes, this is of value to me, I will pay it, this is a great service, or to say, no, this is not. I do believe people will look at it and say, yep, happy to pay it, my stuff's shoveled, the street down there is shoveled, this is good. But that's up to our residents to decide. And I think when we put it into property tax, these types of things, because this is an increase in service, it truthfully is, because we're gonna be doing it in-house. We have to be very clear about it and very transparent and have it right out there in the open for evaluation. And if we put it into property tax, it is buried, and I don't like the ethics of that whatsoever. I get what you're saying. Looking at this is strictly just a cost thing and how do we pay for it and, you know, that type of thing. But there are other considerations. And that is why we had the lengthy discussion and why we worked out the agreement that that's the way we wanted to move forward.
Okay, Dan K. Dan K. already went to your side. Yeah.
Thinking through all this and listening to our prior discussions, it struck me, I thought back to when we were letting our residents clear it themselves, and then we would clear it when they didn't. And when I remember Tom presenting this $5 a season cost to plow for an outside service, and it was like way too good to be true. Turned out to be too good to be true. It was $10 the next year or something like that. And I thought back and I thought, what's the difference of clearing our sidewalks and clearing our streets? It's a public passage. Excuse me. It may be on the front of my property, but it's not mine. It's a public passageway. Mine, in my current townhome, is very much so a public passageway, like I've never experienced before, living in downtown. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, back when we made that decision to bring it in, to take it over and then bill everybody that had a sidewalk $5 and $10 and $15, whatever it is, I'm thinking, this is no different than a road. Why didn't we think of it back then and go, why are we just not taking care of it like we do the roads? Well, maybe because some have them and some don't. And so we thought, well, if you have one, that's a benefit to your property. I don't know. It's an intangible. I can't figure out what the value is. If I have one or I hadn't one, the price of my house really doesn't change.
A little kid on a bike, you might enjoy it, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's more attractive to families from a realtor's perspective. So I started to really step back and go, why didn't we talk about this when the $5 outside service idea came? Well, because who wouldn't jump all over that deal, right? $5 a season, and everybody got their sidewalks. So I've now come back to go, and the cost is nominal at $1.59 annual for everybody, but I kind of think it's just like our streets. We have an obligation to provide clean streets. We also have, as I said earlier, we have an obligation to provide clean sidewalks, because those sidewalks aren't mine exclusively as the property owner. They're a public use, just like the streets are public use. So I have completely backed away from this whole isolating it and fee-basing it to the property owners. I would throw it into the general property the same as we treat our streets, for the exact same reason that our streets aren't, levied to every property owner. Hey, we'll come by and plow your street for you, but you're gonna assess you a fee. We have never done that. So why are we doing that with sidewalks?
Okay.
That's
Carol?
kind of my.
If you're
my
gonna
thoughts.
put this into property tax, this changes my vote to a no.
But
I'm on
there's already
board.
3 of us that
No, I
say
get
we'll
it.
do the fee.
I get it, like, I'm saying fee. I'm
There's
on
3 of
board with
us
fee.
Brenda's already saying that.
Saying it.
Yeah.
So, but if this would get thrown
And I
to
didn't
property tax.
hear Dan say
no.
no to that.
Well,
No.
I'm
He's saying
I'm
he
not.
wants to go to property
Yeah, I don't
tax.
want to assess just the people who own or have a sidewalk in front
No,
of them.
this is
I think
everybody.
the city should be
Yeah.
taking care
Yeah,
of it.
I don't
everybody.
think Option 2 is a flat fee to.
To
all
everybody, all
owners.
property,
All property
owners.
owners.
all property.
All
owners.
property owners who
Yeah.
have a sidewalk, or all
No.
property owners?
No,
in the
all
entire-
property
Property
owners.
Yeah.
If you have a more expensive house, you'll pay
Oh,
more than the
yeah,
guy with the cheaper
you want it
house will
line
pay.
itemed as a fee versus just lumped into.
Yes.
On the
It
water
still
bill.
achieves the same goal. I have no problem with
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
So it was
Okay.
all of us.
yeah,
It still funds the whole program.
Yeah.
Which is to the benefit of the whole city. Everybody throws $1.59 in, and everybody gets better cleared sidewalks, because they're
Okay.
gonna have better equipment with better people, right?
okay. I'm gonna go to Kelly, because everybody is saying, yeah, everybody pays.
I
Okay.
just want to clarify, it's still the homeowners who abut a sidewalk are still paying, and they would pay an additional amount. So right now they're paying 16.60, and that would go to 24.50
So
for a
Dan, you're
resident.
talking about the public non-residential or commercial
right, this is two
properties
different-
we would all share in as a fee separately. The people that abut sidewalks would still have to pay their proportion fee. I agree with that. Then-
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the option 2 that says it's a flat fee to all property owners of $1.59 annually.
You are recognizing then the value of the sidewalk to that property owner. You're basically saying you have something that others don't, and there's an additional fee to have
No,
that
no,
plowed
no,
for you.
look to option 2.
Well, it's the 24.50 you're talking about for people who have a sidewalk.
No.
And then the $1.59 is paid by
That's
everybody
correct.
Yeah.
for the
That's
community,
Yeah, okay.
No, that's what you're saying, is
yeah.
you are still recognizing that the property with the sidewalk is going to pay more because they have a value add by having that sidewalk. Of some sort, value add
Ryan,
of some sort.
I'm going to go to Ryan.
So
Ryan,
we-
I'm
we-
recognizing Ryan.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the comparison is street lighting.
Yeah,
If you have continuous street lighting in your neighborhood, you pay a fee. So that everyone who has continuous street lighting pays that fee. But if you don't have continuous street lighting, you don't pay the fee. But we also have the secondary fee of intersection lighting. So the comparison here is if, just like the intersection lighting, this would be to everybody, the option 2, the flat
yeah,
fee.
the flat fee.
And then if you have a sidewalk in front of your house, you have to pay the top one. So if you have a sidewalk in front of your house, you end up paying 2 different fees. You would have it for the one in front of your house, along with the regional sidewalks or the ones that are adjacent to city streets. That's how the sidewalk or the street lighting works. We got 2 separate fees. So that was the
That was the
comparison.
model you were
Yeah.
following to
Following,
apply
yeah, so-
to the
Okay.
sidewalk.
Kelly?
I just wanted to add a little bit to that. The distinction, though, between the street lighting fee and the sidewalk snow plowing fee is that the street lighting is building for capital replacement, so the major roadway
Yeah, and this is a
intersection lighting
service.
is building for capital replacement. It goes into a fund that builds so that, because that isn't a set amount of operations every year. It's we may replace in year 1 and not again till year 3 or 4. We're building up capital replacement. The sidewalk snow plowing, the way it is now with the contractor is in its own fund, and we did the fee and the transfer over because we were building, or we were charging one flat fee regardless of how many snow events there were, and we were paying the contractor just for the snow events. So we were building for the average year, billing for the average year and paying plus or minus and maintaining that balance in the sidewalk snow plowing fund in order to pay for those years that weren't. This new model really turns it to all operational, and it also mingles what it's performing. So now you're getting trail clearing and the other things that it alleviates the streets and utilities departments from filling in. You're getting additional snow plowing. So in those the years that there's a lot of snow, yes, it's for a lot of snow plowing. In the years it's not, it really is more streets and the trail clearing
Maintenance.
but the cost remains the same. So that was where we were going with the operational. It more mirrors what's being done. The other thing is that on a monthly bill, it's going to be 13 cents, and so then it ends up sort of an administrative. So there is an administrative cost to doing a fee. I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm just giving you information.
You're educating us.
There's so on the utility bill, there are just so many lines, and we will actually have to have that bill redesigned because it will go to 2 pages with additional 13-cent fee.
Like
Which,
you-
there's just, it's just one of those things. And then it does tend to be, and the major roadway lighting one is one where we get a lot of phone calls. Why do I have this little fee? So sometimes the little fees cause more, administrative.
Yeah.
So, that was the only reason those were the reasons, mostly because it matches operationally what we do. We also, accounting wise, as far as having a separate fund anymore, would not really qualify anymore to have a sidewalk snow plowing fund, because it doesn't have the same, there are accounting rules that say when we can use an enterprise fund and when we can use, because it becomes more operational unless
Okay.
that other,
Okay,
so. But we can still do the fee and put it in the general fund. It all rolls through the same.
And it's still
We have lots of
transparent.
things now, recreation.
And that's fine.
and that's still
Recreation
transparent.
has fees and, yes.
Okay, Bill,
I thought about it, I just want to answer your question. I don't know if a sidewalk adds value to the property, but the people, they've always been viewed the people's responsibility to handle it. If the sidewalk has to be replaced, the people on the property have to pay to replace it.
assessed,
Do they
they're
get
assessed.
assessed when
Yes.
we fix the sidewalk in
Yep.
front of their
Yeah,
place?
they're
Yes.
assessed.
So the bottom line is, it may actually be a burden and not a benefit, but the reality is they purchased the property. They chose to purchase the property. Even if the sidewalk wasn't there, their only remedy would have been to stop the city council from just allocating a sidewalk there, and if they failed, then it's a burden with the property.
And Bill, we have that policy in place right now. Whenever we do a street reconstruction and there's no sidewalk in a neighborhood, we ask neighbors to see if they want sidewalk. And if they do, they have to meet the threshold of 60% of the neighbors, right, to come into a public hearing. Am I correct in that policy?
We don't necessarily always reach out. It's almost always unsuccessful.
Yeah, because they
the
really
cost of
don't want to
sidewalk-
have
The cost of
yeah.
the cost of sidewalk is more than your street assessment.
Yeah,
Because you
because
have to
they,
pay 100%.
yeah, and that's, and
the
that,
cost
but,
and the cost to lift it after it's
And then an
sagged.
ongoing
Yeah.
cost after that.
but we do
bad
have
luck
that
to draw a
policy
line.
in place so that people can have it if they want, because people have come in and they want it, and we say you have to have a petition, and 60% of your neighbors have to want to do that to come into a public hearing. And usually they say no. You don't get to that threshold.
Most of the time, you can't get the 35% of the signatures you need.
Yeah.
And then if you get
Yeah.
there, it's
Yeah.
very difficult.
Okay, Bill? Oh, okay. All right.
Just
So
to
I
clarify,
think,
the 72% of the cost, we're saying basically that the owners are covering 72% of it, and the city is covering the rest because of the public use.
yeah, yeah. It's no different than the 40-60 split on street assessments. Yes,
I would
This
shift
also
more.
includes regional trails.
Yeah.
And mostly it's regional trails and
Yeah.
roads that are, or sidewalks that are adjacent to a city property that there is no one to assess. That's the two
We're just
categories.
getting more services.
yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
A lot of those are the ones where you get a lot of people using them, correct.
Okay, what I'm hearing, Kelly and staff and Dana, is that there is consensus around option 2 with the homeowners, that benefiting property owners paying $24.50 annually, plus the $159 that everyone pays. Okay. Okay.
I think we can skip over that
Mm-hmm.
one and we'll
Yeah.
build that into the next. Just making you aware of, because the AIM Center debt was refunded, we did an advance refunding, 2 separate ones a few years back. We're now at a point where we can build those savings into the budget, and we are restructuring the what funds pay it, simplifying the funding structures for transparency. And we have a positive outlook on revenue projections in the AIM Center too, so something to look forward to in the final budget. Okay, so the EDA, this is another one that will take some discussion probably. The EDA financial plan, because we had restructured the ice center debt, that provides us some opportunities for savings in the EDA fund. So you really have three different options. There's probably more than three options, but we are going to show you three options. Build the fund balance for future use, which is kind of what you've been doing in the EDA fund. You could option to invest in the economic development activities, or you could actually reduce the EDA levy and not do either of those things. So this is very small. But this is the 2018 budget in the Economic Development Authority. In 2018, you voted to increase one time the property tax levy of the EDA, so you have a $100,000 increase, and then the plan called for $25,000 increases in the out years, 2019 and going forward. The part that I circled there, the transfer to the Ames Center for debt, that number we had been increasing annually because of declining host fees. That was a number of years, and that has turned around a bit. And then also declining market values, so preparing for that, that when the HOC comes on and takes over, the Heart of the City decertifies. So you can see those numbers, and then that gives you, I've circled where you would be in 5 years, fund balance wise in this fund. So you have $700,000 to $800,000 of fund balance available for whatever economic development activities might come your way. The restructuring of the debt allows us to go back to the original plan of $410,000 from this fund to the Ames Center debt fund. So that really provides you quite a bit of additional funding, less expenses in this fund. The ELF grant, the Environmental Legacy Fund grant, is providing funding for over $1 million of land acquisition and demo. So we would be counting on that use of that money first. So that actually is a revenue of $1 million and an expense of $1 million, just recognizing that you are investing in that sort of thing. You have some funds available to do that sort of thing. And it leaves the budget at the $25,000 annual increase. So that is the same. So the very first line where I've circled, that remains the same. Doing those things actually gives you, after I've shown you 10 years out here versus 5 on the previous slide. The first one at the bottom is where you'd be at $1.5 million, I think that number is. I can't see it from here. And by 10 years, you would have $3 million. So you would have built a pretty healthy fund balance there that you could spend on whatever other economic development activities that or capital improvements, public improvements, that sort of thing, through that, continuing that. The second option is to add economic development services that were suggested by Ellers in the presentation that they gave to you. That also takes into account the reduced debt service levy to the Ames Center, but then would increase the annual debt levy or the annual EDA levy. So 2019, here's where we would have 50,000 instead of 25,000 increase, and then 5% going out. And you would continue the same, so the first few lines are the same economic development activities that you're doing, but then you could add funding for economic development staff or project manager and some marketing staff. And that could be either consultants or it could be staffing. But it provides you that flexibility on an ongoing basis, and then some other economic or some consulting costs. And then a one-time, the early on branding type activities and that sort of $100,000. That's the one I've circled in the green. And that leaves you with fund balances in the $300,000 to $500,000 after 5 and 10 years. So you're able to do that with that level of funding. So we're just giving you some ideas here of how those might play out, those different options, if you want to go down whichever path you want to go down.
Okay, Bill?
Well, I first want to make something clear that I didn't think was clear in some recent articles. When the EDA levy came up last time, Councilmember Schultz and I voted against the $75,000 increase, and we voted to keep it at $25,000, but we were outvoted 3-2. I would be for keeping the levy at the $25,000 level, no increase. For me, I wouldn't be for going to the even 50,000 plus a 5,000 or a 5% addition or any other configuration. So I'm where I was at in recent years at the $25,000 EDA level.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Keeley?
Question on, I know that the recommendation was, read it, a staff project manager and marketing or consulting, / consultant. That's assuming we would hire the person based on your earlier slides about adding a couple folks in that department.
You could start out with consultants and have the flexibility to hire. It basically is that you could use it however
Are these
want.
numbers based on hiring somebody and the cost of labor and benefits, et cetera? That's what's in those numbers?
Those were numbers that were provided to us by Ellers for that kind of position. Is that correct? Or did we come up with?
No, Human Resources Director provided that for some estimated positions. So
Okay.
to get us started, based on the priorities that were put together in the meeting on July 25th, it looks like we're going to need like a project manager, economic development person, along with a marketing person. At least two of the priorities involve marketing, branding, working with partners, image building, this kind of thing. So this proposed budget has resources for those two activities. That's what this is budgeted for. It could be an FTE. It doesn't have to be. It's just kind of earmarking dollars if it were an FTEs. Consulting could cost more than this, could cost less. They're a lot more expensive by the hour, I'll tell you that, and it's a lot of hourly work to do this type of thing. So,
But what you're asking for is the ability to have the resources to
Correct.
do the work.
correct.
Well, the reason I ask is I tend to feel that we're getting into a pretty exciting time of economic development, but we have no abundance of land to know how long this is going to last. And I don't want to, my preference would be not to put in permanent employees for something that is going to be a burst for 5 years, or 3 years, 4 years, but what is it going to be after that? And so I would prefer to walk before we run with consultants until we kind of see what the landscape further out is going to look like, that we're going to actually have a consistent flow of these types of projects. I mean, when you think about all the ones that we're looking at now, there's 7 of them in the pipeline. Well, that kind of chews up all the available property. There's still a few other pieces here and there, but, you know, a lot of the good stuff is getting, you know, the low-hanging fruit is getting projects coming through. So what happens after that? You know, let's say, you know, we run 3
Redevelopment.
years really hot, and then now all of a sudden it cools off because we don't exactly have a lot of land available unless the MRQ South comes online, and there's some properties there. So how long will it go? And I just don't want to beef up in a permanent scenario when we really don't have a whole lot of land. I mean, we're not a Lakeville. If we were, I'd say this is a good decision to beef up. But unless MRQ comes online, I don't know where else we're going to find land for projects to continue to keep the folks that we hire busy. So I would prefer to walk with a consultant until we've established a pattern and we know what's going to happen 5 or 10 years out, and then we can invest in a permanent person if we decide to do that.
But Jenny?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my recollection is that the consultant said we can do redevelopment. I mean, redevelopment is
All over
not
the
on
city.
vacant land. It's on completely built-out land,
Yeah.
and this takes twice as many resources,
That's
boots
right.
on the ground, to make something happen. So, and that's where we're at right now, quite frankly, right? We're 98, 99% built out. And so we do need those, if you want to reinvest and get this ball rolling, some more resources to help make that happen, because we simply can't do it with the resources that we have now. The city's going to continue to age. There will always be aging properties, and when you look at the communities that were highlighted as part of that study, those are all staff that they have to manage their aging
Yeah.
communities. I think one of them was 12, one of them was 10, one of them was 5, 7. Those are FTEs. They have consultants on top of that. Stacy, I think,
Yeah.
and Jason work for all those communities in addition to the staff that they have. I would also say, and my years of management here, and my colleagues can speak to this from a staffing standpoint, there's always attrition.
Yeah,
People
that's
coming
right.
and going, and we
Yeah.
re-look at positions when they come open. So I understand your concern, but things are evolving and always changing from a staffing level when we look at FTEs versus consultants. But certainly whatever, some resources are better than none, and we will manage those
Yeah.
to help get you to where you want to be at the end of the day.
And what we did, Dan and everyone, is when development started to wane in the city, those people were let go. It's like Jenny says, there's attrition, or we just didn't have the work and they were let go.
I would say, Madam Mayor, a lot of them were positions that are, people leave, they retire, they go on to somewhere else, and
And
then do
then
we
we
still
didn't
need
fill
that?
it.
Somebody brought up the example about a staffing change in IT, for instance, right? And repositioning that to meet our needs. It would be a very similar thing that happens in every department today, and it has for years.
Okay. Kelly, I see that we still have a whole lot, so how much,
I
to
think
get
we've
to
hit the-
giving you direction for?
I think we've hit the highlights, because we've talked about Parks Capital,
Yeah.
and the, things we told you is that there are challenges there. We'll build a finance plan. We've talked about the rest of these. I guess on the facilities fund, the franchise fees, if there's an appetite for addressing raising franchise
The
fees
increase.
versus, that is an opportunity to lower the property tax levy, if you wanted to do that. And otherwise, I think the rest of our slides are, things you've seen already.
Okay. So it appears to me, Kelly and staff and Dana, that there is a lot of work yet to be done. But to get through the max tax, you're saying 4.9. But as I listen to you, 4.9 for the max tax. right?
Yeah, I had another slide, yeah.
Oh, Okay.
You
Oh,
reminded me
sorry.
of another slide I had that added up to, if you were going to add on any of these things, which you're not, I think, because we decided on the sidewalk snow plowing would actually come off, so we would, 4.9 would be fine. I'm sorry. It's getting late.
so, and so if you're saying for max tax, we go to 4.9, and as I listen to you, there are opportunities that are available to staff to bring that down a bit like you always have. I mean, it's been very comprehensive what you have presented this evening. From where we're at, all of the pressures, what we need to do. I really thank you in terms of saying, we're at a point where we're going to need people. We've done a lot of things in technology, and technology can only take us so far, and now we need people. A lot of the work in economic development with the things that we need to do, especially if we're looking at just the redevelopment of the 42 corridor, that's redevelopment. That's going to need people. I mean, I made a phone call and found the people who own the Cub site on 42 and got them to come in today. And it was a very good meeting, was it not, Jenny?
That's very good.
They're willing to redevelop that property. So that's going to mean a lot of work. Jenny's going to be working with them to really understand what that's going to look like. I said that we're going to be very, we're friendly, business friendly. We're open to rezoning that area to make it mixed use. They were very excited about that. So there's a lot of things that's going to be done. Bill?
I just want to make sure on the slide with the $15,000 for the shopping center and that $15,000 for that other, you've not factored that, that's not in the budget, that's a separate discussion at a different time, right?
I guess that is one area we'd like to get some direction from you, if those two items are items that council wishes us to,
Tonight.
yes.
Still have time till the mandatory.
Well, I'm against both of them, so.
You pull that list up again,
Yeah,
please.
what do you specifically?
service
Yeah,
level
it's
changes.
the,
The service level changes
This-
slide.
It was a rather long list, if I recall.
yeah, there,
we go.
NLC membership.
I'm against the first two.
The others, I think we've covered and we'll,
I see value in the NLC membership and conference. Going to those conferences, I think, helps each and every one of us to increase our knowledge base, having discussions with other folks, also helping with policies that are done in other cities that we can bring back. So those were cut during the recession. And, you know, I just believe that we are an organization that says that we are a learning organization. And if you're not at the table, you can't make a difference. And we need to be at the table to make a difference. So I think it's important because the council needs to go to these conferences, and we need to make sure that we have a membership so that we don't have to pay the higher rates. Dan?
I agree. I look at the NLC as continuing education, in which we don't get a whole lot of. I mean, we have the LMC a couple times a year, but that's about it. And
And
we
aren't
can
you
really
close
learn.
to your leadership
I am,
skill sets?
But besides that, it's really what we learn at those conferences from people around the country. 'Cause
Oh, my God,
all
yes.
all the cities are going through different things that we're going through, and all of them have different ideas, and ideas we don't always think of because we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You learn those things. I mean, our governance system comes from NLC. That's why we have the Carver form of governance
I went
in
there.
the city today. So good things come from that, and it's a good continuing education for, I think, the entire council.
Yeah.
And staff goes to those things too, by the way.
And all of our staff members in every department have membership in their professional organizations. And there's great value in all of that. We need to be continuously learning, and we need to make sure that this is a value for us, that education and continuously learning and improving our knowledge base and skill sets is a value.
So I'd love to hear why then going to a Las Vegas shopping center conference where all the major players are there somehow helps. Mayor.
I think I'm going to go defer that to Councilmember Keeley, because that was something that you say that it's of great value for us to participate in the ICSI.
The NLC membership and conference it's like the Minnesota League of Cities. It's an investment in educating us as elected officials, and we do get some networking benefit out of it. And there's value to being at the table, but that's a intangible ROI. It's an expense with an intangible ROI. So, I think it's open for discussion, and it's not that big of an amount, so I don't know it's worth debating all night. But the shopping center conference is much like EDA, and Cottage Grove sent 3 or 4 people for under 6,000, so I'm not sure where the 15,000 came from. That is a defined ROI, much like sending Skip to the STEM conferences, or Jenny. I think Skip goes. I don't know. Do you go too?
Not to those.
Skip goes. It's getting in front of people, and in this case, it's getting in front of retailers, restaurants, any kind of retail business you can think of, is there. And it puts us in front of them, and it's one of those things where one deal, one player, one restaurant brought in to the city can pay back your price of admission and trip costs. It's very, very ROI driven from my perspective. And so, to me, that's a bigger priority than the NLC conference, because we can tie results and attracting businesses to Burnsville. And I think the timing of it is important because we become at the table with respect to the County Road 42 and the mall. We're there as a city. And one thing I've learned, and Dan can talk about this because this is really his area, not mine, but investors, developers, and businesses love it when cities are present along with developers at these shows. It's I will tell you that a lot of this information came from Mayor Myron Bailey, who I work with, Mayor of Cottage Grove. They've gone for years, and the number of deals that they have brought back to fill vacant space, to put in new space, is unbelievable. And it's $6,000 for he and 3 people to travel there and back for 2 or 3 days. It's not that much expense, but it does pay an enormous ROI. So I would like us to do that. And one of the things that he and other developers have noted is the number of cities showing up is growing dramatically every year. Everybody's catching on to the fact that when you take your city to where the investors are, where all those businesses are, they respond. They really respond because they appreciate the city coming to the table going, we have vacant space. We're interested in you coming to our town. And it's not that you have to put incentives, you don't have to, you don't even need to play our demo card or our land assembly card. It's really existing space. It's businesses looking to locate in cities where cities have rolled out the red carpet and said, come to our city. Here's our story. Here's Burnsville's story. We have a regional center. We have a ski hill. We have all these assets. Because otherwise, we're just not on their radar at all. So it's a way to put ourselves on that radar. And I think we would bring a return on investment for that. And it wouldn't be 15 grand unless we had a larger contingency going.
Okay, Kara?
In looking at the shopping center conference attendance, and perhaps other things like that, perhaps for 2019, instead of paying our membership for, oh gosh, what's that group that
Greater MSP?
markets that
Greater
markets
MSP.
Greater MSP. How about instead of in 2019 we pay the $25,000 to Greater MSP and we have that as a budget for attending these types of events, and perhaps that's a greater ROI.
It could very well be, because being part of Greater MSP is being part of a bigger thing in our specific metro. This is us going out and actually pulling deals in for our city ourselves.
And then
So
it's
there
just
would be some.
like for revenue or for spending.
Jenny?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I would just point out that there's other shows we could go to, too.
Yeah,
to get in
this
front
is
of
only one,
brokers
right?
and
Skip brought that up, right?
Yeah, so
There's
just
medical trade show and.
there's all kinds. There's national site selectors, that we can participate with deed on, and different things that we can attend. So
Okay, so what if we took that as a $25,000 budget, since we wouldn't be then a member of Greater MSP, and we put it towards those, promoting our city at those types of events?
Bill?
I'd consider that as long, but let's go a step further than allocating $5,000 per council person. I won't be here, so, but the cap per council person, $5,000 cap out of that 25,000 with the 5 people. That's the 4 council members and the mayor.
Well, let's
kind of
stay at the higher
25,000.
level and say if NLC is what you want to do and you're making a decision on one, then, because some might want to go one thing and some might want to go, but let it just be what you want to do, so. Yes, Kelly?
I'll throw out a couple options here. On the shopping center, if you want to allocate some more spending in the early years of the EDA, you could add, you know, because what we showed you was sort of a consistent over a number of years, and you have fund balance there. If you want to front load some things in this 2019, and you wouldn't have to raise any taxes or cut anything else, you would be spending some fund balance for that. That would be an option. It sounds like if you have some interest in the NLC, we do, as I mentioned, we have some things that we are working on trying to bring down the cost. We have some things we're vetting still. If we can fit it in the 4.9, would you like to give us that direction?
Well, why don't you do some of that work, since there's a lot of stuff there are a lot of moving parts, and then come back. Yes, I'll go to Dan G. and then Bill.
Well, I'm looking at the shopping center thing, and I hear what you're saying, Dan. I said, but we don't own the space, and we don't lease the space. And the people that do own the space are out there doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a value for possibly our economic development group to be out there, because they have the answers.
Oh,
We're
that's
the
who
policymakers. And
I
it'd be
wasn't saying we would go
Jenny's
to it.
staff would go out and do something like that
Sure.
and pick out some shows.
Oh, yeah.
As we start to market ourselves as a city especially with our redevelopment.
I'm not, because Cottage Grove mayor goes and many other cities' mayors go, not all of them do.
Yeah,
It's
I would
basically
be in favor
economic
of our
development
economic
staff that
team going
shows
out
up
and marketing our city
works
a
the
lot
show.
more than they're
Absolutely.
capable of doing right
Yeah.
now.
So
And-
why don't
and
we
we
let
should
our
ask Jenny if she
staff,
actually wants to
why
do
don't we
that.
let our
I will do it.
staff come
Sounds like
back
fun.
with some options of
Okay.
this?
We're champions. for
Okay,
the
why
city.
don't you come back with some options of this, and I'm just watching our time. And you're wanting, you're saying 4.9, if this is for the max tax to move forward? And then with those two things, because the others have already been addressed? Dana?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, just for my clarification, when you say bring back options and continue to work,
Yeah,
are we
like-
looking at options for funding this?
Yeah,
Or are we looking at
yeah.
specific options on,
Well, for funding, Kelly was saying that there's some way that you can fund it in the front end. Just give us some options when you come back.
that's helpful, thank you.
Okay, yes.
I think Ms. Strye's suggestion might be, because this is new for us, maybe the right approach to attending some shows is have staff look at the different shows, because there's a medical show and that other one Skip had mentioned, and identify a few, a budget for them, and let's do that using our fund balance for a couple years to find out, are we going to be successful in doing it before we adopt it as a part of a budget that we need to fund on an ongoing basis, because they're not that expensive to attend. I mean, this is, like I said, I mean, Cottage Grove's gone for several years at less than $6,000 for 4 people to one show.
Okay.
So I don't know where the 15 came from, but that's quite a bit higher than.
Let's have
that might handle
staff
several
do
shows
that.
then.
Let's have
Yeah.
staff do that and come back with options. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and
But
then.
what you're wanting tonight is to move forward with, to have consensus to move forward with 4.9 for the max tax, and then we'll continue to do our work before we have the adoption of the budget and the levy in December.
Can I ask one last question? Are you supportive of the IT FTE increase?
Is
If
that
we
in the
build it
budget?
within
It's
the
in the
4.9.
4.9. I mean, the 4.9 is what you presented.
Yeah, so if we build it within the 4.9.
4.9. Okay. Is there anything else? Is it clear, or do we need to make it more clear?
And so the clarity is on if we're looking at setting the max tax at 4.9. That
That's
is
right.
what we're talking about
That's
right
right.
this moment.
That's right.
It will be one less than consensus.
Okay. Okay. But it is the majority of the council to move forward with 4.9.
Yeah, we're not
Okay.
voting on a tax, we're just voting on the max.
On the max tax.
Yeah, I don't-
That's
it
right,
doesn't
it's the
matter.
max tax. Okay? And this is what we do. We vote on the max tax, and then there's still a lot of work to be done between now and November to adopt it in December.
Yeah.
Okay? All right? Is that good?
That's
All right,
good.
and then I think, Ryan, the sidewalk, snowplow vehicles, you've already done that. Do you want to do?
I definitely need an item. I need approval to purchase them with a
Yes,
motion as.
all you need is the approval to purchase the vehicles.
Right, if you can approve whatever item that is.
Yeah. There's a
officially.
motion. Is there a second? A second. Is there discussion? Yeah, I seconded it. Because nobody was second, I seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose, say nay. Are you and I on a vehicle purchase for the snow plowing?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they need to buy it now and save
Yeah.
44
Well,
grand.
That's a lot of
yes,
money.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
Just the fee
all
would
right.
go up.
yeah.
You, okay,
Get under that contract
Okay.
and save the
Your quickest one,
44,000.
Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's kind of a just do it. That's like,
Yeah.
do we need
Okay.
to
Anyway.
debate saving money or
because
not?
he needs to purchase it, and that's more than $20,000.
Yes.
Correct,
Okay,
so.
You
is
Michelle,
it
you're happy
clear?
with
Needed a formal motion for it, I guess.
It was a formal
Yep.
motion, and Dan made the motion, I second, and
We voted on it.
we
Aye.
voted on it.
Yeah.
Unless,
I enthusiastically vote for saving money.
yeah, okay,
Well, thank you.
No matter
Thank you
how
very
much
much for
it's
supporting this program. We will be implementing
yeah,
and,
thank you. And then the next one is the review of salaries. Now, this one, John, I just want you to know that there has not been a salary adjustment since 2007.
I don't think he's had
Okay,
one either.
because I just don't want to see the headline saying, yeah, okay, the headlines would say, yeah,
Maintaining a job.
okay, Michelle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. As you just reported in our background, we did do a survey of some of the market cities in our area and also just some other cities for informational purposes. Not all of our cities are identified as market cities, but some of them are our neighbors or similar cities, similar size cities. So I did get some additional information out there for you. And when we looked at this salary survey, we noticed that a lot of our market cities have recently made increases to the salary for the mayor and council, and that has now put Burnsville at the very bottom of the salary for this survey. We kind of took the average, knowing that the council has a compensation philosophy of paying in the mid-range, and we did an average of those market cities, and it looks like we show up about $235 below the mid-range for mayor and about $202 below for the mid-range for city council. I stand for any questions.
Questions of Michelle? Okay. Yeah, Dan?
Our policy in the city is to be mid-range on pretty much everything we do. We certainly don't apply that to ourselves. And it's been 2006 was the last time?
We approved
Yeah,
the last increase in 2006
Yeah.
that took effect in 2007.
Right, so it's been 12 years.
Similarly, if we want to make any change, we would need to do that in 2018
Mm-hmm.
before the election for it to be implemented starting in January of 2019.
Well, I would be supportive of going to the mid-range for the council. We treat the entire city staff in the mid-range, and I think we should be there as well.
Okay,
I'm against it every year. I'm at zero.
okay.
If I continued to serve, I'd still be in that position, no increase.
Okay. Anybody else? Any comments? Well, I believe that there's value to the work that we do. And the more that we neglect looking at a salary adjustment for the mayor and council, the more we say that there is no value to the work that we do. And that's, in one way, a true statement, and in another way it isn't, because we serve as public servants, and we serve because we want to serve, not for a salary. But if we look at how much we get paid, I can tell you when people ask me sometimes what your salary is, I say, well, but there are days when and weeks where it's 10 cents an hour because of the amount of work that gets done and the amount of money that one receives. But we don't work for the money. But when you look at the salaries for all the elected officials all around, and Michelle has done the survey, we're now at the bottom half. And I think it is time for us to say, yes, let's make an adjustment, and we do it at the mid-range, which is our policy. So I believe it's time for us to make an adjustment to the compensation. That compensation is really about service. And it's not about how much we make. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
When we look at staff, when we look at city manager, when we look at all of those types, it's, you know, we don't just look at, are they the mid-range? We also just look at, like, cost of living.
Yeah, and we don't do cost of living for us.
So my question is, rather than do this type of vote, why would it not just be a cost of living
Increase. I think we had that discussion, Joel.
Mayor and council, the statute is structured.
Yeah,
to say no, no, no?
yeah, because it's not
No,
transparent.
it's structured for the council to take an affirmative vote on each increase. It
Yeah.
didn't contemplate the automatic inflator.
Yeah,
In your research material, you'll note that there are a couple cities that, in conjunction with the increase, decided that they didn't want to have to go through this every 5 or 10 years and would just put an annual inflator in.
yeah,
I expressed concern
Yeah.
about doing that because it's not within the four corners of the statutory authorization. That advice has been ignored in some of my client cities and others, and they put it in. It's a little bit on the edge.
And
My recommendation is, with the history of the legislature, the history of local government salaries, you should increase your salary. You should do it more frequently than you have. You owe it to the constituents and to future candidates for office to entice good people to volunteer their time, because even as you indicated, with increased compensation, you're not getting minimum wage.
No.
And that's regardless which city is listed up there. It's intended to go into effect after the next election for a reason. I think going to the midpoint is highly defensible, logical, and should have been done years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't personally I don't recommend doing the COLA.
Yeah.
You would be in the smaller group of cities that have done it, and there has been some criticism about the automatic increases.
Yeah.
Like I said, it is out of the
And it's not
mainstream.
transparent. And that's the reason why we didn't do it in the past.
Yeah.
Because that whole issue came up. And we had discussions around that, and you gave us your counsel, and we said, no. It takes a vote of the council to say, yes, let's,
So instead, you would have to do, to be compliant, a yearly COLA vote.
Yes.
I don't think you can do it in a non-election year, can you?
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could do it, it just doesn't go into effect the next election. You
Yeah.
could
Okay.
take
Until the
actions
next election.
annually.
Yeah.
The way they do it.
yeah. Okay. Michelle?
Madam Mayor, City
Yeah.
Council, the council could elect to do, annual increases over 2 years. Like, right now, you could elect to do an increase for 2019 at whatever dollar amount, and 2020 at an additional dollar amount or percentage.
And certain cities have done that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a few options.
Okay. So, I need to know if there's a consensus to bring this to a consent agenda to increase the salaries for elected officials.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay?
I'd want it polled. So I want a voice vote on it, because I'm going to vote
Yeah.
against it.
Okay? And Kara?
I am a no, I'm sorry.
Okay. Dan?
No.
No. And there's, I'm for it, And so there are 2 and then 3, so the thing is, there is no raise for the elected officials. Okay? That's that. Okay, now we move on to the round table, the double frontage setback issue, and I think this is Councilmember Schultz.
Correct. So I had a resident contact me, and what prompted it is they were looking to put a shed in their backyard. But when they did so, they found out because there is a road that goes behind their house, even though you can't see their yard from the road because of the incline and trees and all that kind of stuff, it was still considered a double front yard. And so they would not be able to put a shed there. You couldn't do certain type of fencing, all of those kinds of things. And so they didn't want to bring it forward because they had also noticed, like, some neighbors had some items that maybe wouldn't pass, right? So in looking at that, I see it in a couple ways. Number one, these people that, like, they own their property. That is their backyard. That's their backyard. It's not their front yard, it's their backyard. I get that, you know, a backyard may be visible from a street. It's still a backyard. And people should have the ability to do things like put a fence in to keep their children and their pets safe while they're playing in their backyard, and also have, you know, a small shed like most anyone else can have to put their lawn implements in and other things like that, and seasonal toys. So I would like this to be looked at on that double, like how they call it, a double front yard. And to see, is this something that we should look at changing? Because it does appear, just from kind of taking a look, this isn't something that has a high degree of compliance.
I don't know. Joel?
Mayor, it's common, particularly with riparian lots where you're visible from the lake.
Yeah.
You have 2 front yards in many of the situations, so
Yeah.
it's very common in shoreland zones for accessory structure placement to be subject to different rules. And we do treat double front lots differently in our assessment policies
Yeah.
and those types of things. So it is not uncommon. I can't honestly tell you even what our current code is for some of those provisions. Certainly if an applicant wanted a variance, the fact that it's a double fronted lot would provide the basis for a variance under practical difficulties test. But to look at something like that, we can certainly work with staff to evaluate that. It is logical. I mean, it is a
Okay.
difficult situation when you have, and one thing you know about properties is there's a lot of unique situations where the general rule needs to give way a little bit for fairness and equity purposes.
Okay, so Bill?
And I understand that reasoning, just with one caveat. There are a number of neighborhoods that people don't know about that on their deed, there are significant restrictions, including mine. For example, there are a couple sheds, even in my neighborhood, that are totally illegal because if they, as I've shown a number of neighbors, there are
Restrictive
covenants that run with the land, that including no sheds, and that if somebody wrote the city that person a letter or something, I mean, they'd have to actually remove the shed. So I have no objection to looking at what you're talking about, but people should really be aware that there are restrictive covenants in a lot of these.
Yeah, I'm okay with us
places.
looking at it also and directing staff. You just all need to know when that's going to come back to us because of all the stuff that's on their plates, especially with the.
Totally understand.
Yeah, so it might not even be until next year. Yeah, I see. That's what I'm looking at, Ryan and Jenny, because you have to look at all of the land use and then you have to look at all of those and with Joel. So, okay, I'm okay with that. You're okay with bringing it back? Okay, there's consensus here to bring it back in the future so that we can take a look at that. Okay, I think it is also yours, Kara, with the grandfathering of the carports and the awnings for manufactured homes.
Correct. So what we have is when we were doing proactive compliance checks, and we did that in our manufactured home communities. There were issues with the carports. That was one of the issues that was seen. What I'm looking for is, and originally I had put this in as is there a way that we can grandfather in the existing carports that are already there? Because when you have people, especially in lower income housing, and you're telling them that the major remedies are either to tear it down, or to go through a fairly expensive rebuild, or to ask them to comply in ways that, because of the special nature of where they live, they can't comply. I mean, they simply can't comply. Is there a way that we could not go that route? What solutions could we come up with that we are not placing them in that position? And I saw the letter that was submitted in our background, and it does look like there are some options that we could go forward with. And I think that the two methods that one was kind of alluded to and one was more specifically called out, either of those I think would be a humane way of handling this situation. To either say, council, through its budgetary ways, we're not going to allocate resources to specifically go out there and do enforcement. That was kind of alluded to in the letter. More forthrightly, if I could ask you to outline a little better, and it was in the last paragraph of that letter that was submitted.
The last paragraph is basically, wouldn't recommend, and I don't think the statute allows, a blanket grandfathering acted on by the council, but rather a ability of the building code official to work cooperatively as much as possible with the property owners to fashion a response that gets them code compliant at a reasonable low cost effort. We made the change with the setback and the zoning. And in none of our enforcement actions are we seeking a violation or a fine. It is compliance.
Right.
And with the building code, and particularly in these life safety areas, where the carport, if not properly anchored, is about as dangerous of a accessory structure you can imagine in a high wind environment, we do want to make sure that to the extent possible we can get them code compliant. And staff has been working with that and has been having communications with park officials and residents, and we'll continue to do that. But the code official does have some authority to look at it on a case-by-case basis and try to work with it. But we're not going to be in a position from staff's perspective that we would say the current situation as it is would be acceptable. There should be some measures taken to promote public safety and get as close to compliance with code if for whatever reason we can't actually get it retrofitted to exact code standards without, exorbitant cost. But.
And Joel and Jenny, if you can also remind me, because the thing is, the property belongs to the owner of the mobile home park.
Yes, in almost all those situations, that's correct.
And so they also have in place, if I understand, their own covenants on how that's all structured.
They may not allow the structure itself.
That's right.
Most of the regulations don't get into detail. They just kind of assume or presume that a person putting in would be code compliant. Some of the carports obviously were put in that were not compliant.
Yeah. So your
my recommendation is that we will continue as staff to get an understand or try to promote full compliance in this area with as soft a touch as possible with the residents.
and also with the property owner.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes. Kara, and then I'll go to Bill.
With a focus that these are generally speaking lower income persons.
Understood.
Yeah.
very much so.
And also understanding that we allow structures such as gazebos and other things like that that could also be tornado hazards or high wind hazards or however you want to call it. And we're totally good with that.
The only exception I would say is that in those situations too, we do want them code compliant. And if those accessory structures are outside of the building code, that's the issue. But there's a lot of liability on the part of the city if we don't administer or enforce the code the way it is written. And if we have changes that we want to try to release the code, there's a mechanism by we can make the changes to the state building code, but that's for the entire state. That's not just Burnsville specific.
Yeah.
And it's come up on issues like sprinklers, and it's come up with storm shelters, slab-on-grade housing, and the rest. So this is unique. This is something that we bumped up against in our proactive enforcement program, but it's not wholly unique to the city with building code issues.
Okay, Bill?
And just to that end, again, it becomes really a liability question. We could not,
Yeah.
from a grandfather standpoint,
Yeah.
if someone's injured, listen, I mean, since I've successfully sued people for millions of dollars, I can tell you that it doesn't take that great an injury. And while the mobile home person's not gonna have enough money, they will, if someone is injured, they'll sue the owner, and they'll sue the
mobile
city.
home owner.
They'll sue the city if we had some unusual, unique deal, especially after we came out and said, "Oh, okay, all right," So again, there's always the rest of the story. And believe me, poor, rich, whatever, if someone's injured out there, they will sue whoever they can. And and Joe's right in that regard. And so again, and that'd be true with a gazebo in someone's backyard, that'd be true, with whatever, so. But it sounds like they're
We
gonna work
have-
hard to be fair.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like, Joel, you have a remedy and that we continue down the path that we're working on and to look at these on a case-by-case basis and be very clear.
In a couple months on it.
Yeah,
I would love that.
yeah.
Thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And then the other is that to make sure that we continue to have good communication with the mobile home park owners, because I know two of those
They have no
owners are
other
out of
situation
state.
that they can do.
They're absentee owners. Is that both Rambush and, well, it's not Camelot anymore, is it?
Arbor Vista.
Yeah, Arbor Vista.
I mean, that's a
Yeah, so you all are doing a great job, so just continue and then giving us some,
We'll give you
An
some
update.
feedback, Mayor.
okay, thank you. Okay, the other is, Kara, this one is yours too. This is the
No.
private property native
On a roll.
plantings.
I'm on a roll. Yes. Okay, so what we're looking at is, we have in the past, and we do have certain things that we do for promoting native plantings in Burnsville. And what I'm asking isn't an expansion, or it isn't anything real big like that. What it is it's looking at especially for when we notice there is a compliance issue with someone's yard, they're not able to care for their yard anymore. And so, usually then a neighbor or something like that will call the city and say, the weeds are up to here and it's just not being taken care of. Can we use those as opportunities to identify those persons? And then what we can do is we can provide them with the sketch plan for how their yard could be naturalized with the native plants instead. And then look at partnering with an outside organization that they could provide the labor, not just to put it in, but there's a 2-year time when they need to go back and do a little maintenance, to get it up and going so that then it's a very, very low maintenance solution for them.
Who pays
So-
for that labor with the?
We do not do that. That's an outside organization that's doing that as a donation. So we're looking for a partner,
Do you know of
if
any
there's a partner.
that do that?
Before I even approach that, we have some ideas, But I just want to know if this is something we even want to look at, because we do have a few ideas for a couple of organizations that may be interested in that.
What does our ordinance say about the front lawn? This is about front lawn, not the back lawn. Or, well, we have property maintenance, so.
It's lawn, it's front and back.
Madam Mayor, I think, this is kind of a joint effort between natural resources outreach, I think, and code enforcement, and what
Yes.
triggers the interaction. So we certainly have property maintenance codes, it's 8 inches or higher for weeds, grass, it doesn't matter what it is. If that goes unmowed, then we have a service that goes out and mows it
Yeah,
for
I know
them,
that,
and then that
yeah.
goes on the tax roll. So that's how we
Yeah.
proactively take that on.
Yeah.
It's my understanding with native plantings, they're a lot of work and they may be more expensive than going out and mowing your yard, but I'll turn that over to Ryan. We had a conversation about this behind the scenes. I don't believe what Councilmember Schultz is asking can't happen. It's just, what resources would it take
Yeah.
and how that would look.
Well, first of all, we're definitely always looking for these opportunities to put these native type of plantings in. The target audience is people who really want to do it. So if your only motivation is to not have to mow your yard, I'm not necessarily confident that would be the type of person that would be wanting to do the maintenance. And I totally understand what you're saying. You're saying someone else is going to do it for them. And so, if it could be successful, we are looking for any opportunity to do it. I'm just concerned about this. I have concerns over our ability to make it successful. If it was additional resource to go out and find the agency and then put the plan together, we could certainly handle that. Natural resources, it'd be difficult with the current staffing we have to implement additional tasks.
In the conversation that we had, when we were talking about, could you devise a natural planting that would be a low maintenance? And the response was the first 2 years it is not. After that, it is. And that's what we were looking at. And so that there would be, and that would be the assistance that we would be offering, which is plant selection. Like what plants would be good for that? What ones would achieve that aim? What ways can we assist our residents into not only being compliant with what our rules are, but also doing this benefit, which is to have a more natural area. If their only motivation is, I don't want to mow the lawn, this is not the thing for them. But if their motivation is, I can't comply anymore, and yes, this would be great, but I can't do the initial work because I already can't do these types of things for my lawn. Or if you have a homeowner who says, I do want to do this, and in fact, I am willing to even put the labor in and that type of stuff, we still have the plan, and that might make more people willing to do it. If you have like sample front yard plans, that type of thing, these types of plants are lower maintenance. Yes, here's what you need to do your first 2 years, because we already have like free classes and things like that we offer,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So this would be more of a matchmaking effort.
Okay. Council, are you open to having staff come back with some solutions and opportunities, and also look at our ordinance and what works and what doesn't work?
Yes.
Okay? And again, I know your schedule, so just
Yes.
managing expectation.
It's going to be a ways.
Yeah.
Ryan,
So,
tomorrow?
yeah, with Ryan.
What's that next
So it'd be tomorrow, right?
We'll buy our
Yeah.
equipment from South Coast
Thank
Snow
you.
Pine tomorrow, and then we'll
Yeah.
get.
Yeah, get it to the state thing so you can save some money.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
Bill, do you have any reports?
Nope.
Dan?
No.
Okay. Kara?
No, I do not.
Okay, Dan?
Come on.
It's 9:38.
Of course he does.
0-3, and I'm 0 for 3, and you're gonna expect me to
You know,
go
Joel,
along with that. I'm trying. Let
you
me
can
see.
leave. I know you have all kinds of
No,
stuff.
I'd like to share good news if I get an opportunity.
Okay,
Well,
great.
why don't you go first then? Because my news is.
Maybe he doesn't want
good
his
news.
televised.
Yeah, and put yours in an executive summary, Dan.
Mayor and
Joel.
council, as you know, the district court judge ruled in the city and Chase's favor in the Nika Plaza case last week. And just so you know, today we received notice that the Supreme Court rejected the appeal request
Nice.
on the massage therapist, so that decision of the council has also been supported 100%.
Thank you so much. Good news. Okay, Dan, executive summary.
Went to a meeting.
Not a blow-by-blow, just a big,
Well, everyone knows that the fire muster is coming up quick and the Hollywood City race, so big fun festivals. Good enough.
okay,
I'll save
very
the rest
good.
for not later.
Yeah.
On the-
And
different meeting.
with that, Michelle, do you have anything else? Dana?
Nothing.
We stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you, everybody.